All right. Here we are. We've done it. We hit the stream button. We're recording. We're doing it. I'm seeing myself on Twitch. That means we are definitely streaming. I have a new webcam. So I have a new webcam. The new webcam is got me feeling shaky. So it's like, I'm like, is this thing actually gonna work? Is the whole thing gonna fall apart? We'll see how it all goes. But so far, so good. Peanut Butter Beatrice, good to see you. Good evening. My little dog is sitting over here being a whiny little butt. I'm like desperately concerned that he's just gonna, like, the moment I hit record, he's gonna be like, gotta go down to poo. I'm like, I took you down like 4 times. He's like, yeah, but I didn't poo then, but now I need to poo. Austin Wallace, good to see you. Peanut Butter Beatrice says, wow, looks great. I hope so. It's I can't really, if I had to be really honest with you guys, I feel like I can't really tell the difference. So I'm worried that I just spent like a bunch of money for, like, I don't know. Does it look sharper? The Goat, good to see you. Bloop, good to see you. Rocking the red shirt for Canada and communism. That's right. Even though this is like a Canada Pacific shirt, but that's okay. Red for communism. Absolutely. Bloop, good evening to you. Another great day to be alive in this capitalist shit show. And boy, howdy, is it just getting shit showier. Did the mic change? Nope. Same old mic. Burn Slots over on Twitch says much sharper. Very good. Part of the problem, guys, when it comes to this kind of technology thing is that there comes a point where the technology surpasses my vision. Like these glasses, not for show. I definitely need them. So it's like every so often people try to sell me on like, but the HD 40K, the 442 180p, and I'm like, okay, cool. Like, what's my eyes operate at? And when I take a look at that, it's like, oh, my eyes operate here, and you're telling me that this is like up here, so my eyes can't tell the difference. Like literally, my eyes cannot tell the difference. So I'm just like, okay. But if you guys are saying it's a sharper image, I'm just going to believe you. I feel like getting a better camera is a good idea in the first place because I think it's going to help me with other ideas and other thoughts and other projects that I have in my silly mind. So, what's been going on this week, eh? It feels like this is a settle-in week. That all the dumb shit happened last week, or in the last couple of weeks, through January, let's say. The January really was just a month. January, like early February, was really like we had a month of just like a bunch of crazy shit. And now we're all kind of settling into it and sort of picking through. We're like doing an autopsy on the first month of this ridiculous nightmare shit show and realizing, hey, this is the best, that it's actually a lot worse than I think people thought. I think it's a lot worse than people thought it was going to be, and it's going to be a lot worse than I think people thought it was going to be. And like we're seeing here. Like, first of all, this is an old article, but I feel like it matters, right? The headline matters. Hey guys, guess what? 50 years of tax cuts for the rich failed to trickle down. What? You don't say. 50 years of tax cuts, and now we got a guy in who is actively seeking even more tax cuts, right? Peanut Butter Beatrice writes, I had to justify my existence to Elon yesterday. Yeah, that to me is the like big crazy part of this story. The big crazy part of this story is that nobody expected that we would have to like kowtow to Elon Musk. No one was sitting here like on the lead up. I certainly wasn't, right? Like I wasn't sitting here. Like I was aware that Elon Musk and like Peter Thiel and the oligarchs were gonna be like funding Donald Trump, right? And that he was going to be the face of all of this, but nobody expected that it was going to be like all of the sudden King Elon. You know, like all of the sudden Elon Musk is at the forefront of the entire conversation. And that Elon Musk is the conversation that we're having. 1 second, guys. Sorry. Okay, buddy. Okay, you're a good boy. You're a good boy. You're just sitting over there whining for nothing, buddy. You've had all your treats. You had all your food. You're good. You're a good boy. I know. I'm not paying 100% attention to you 100% of the time. I know. Dogs, man. Dogs. Just sitting over there whining for nothing. Hi, Jeff. How are you? Like, if it was up to him, he literally would do nothing but eat peanut butter all day long. Just like I would spend like my entire paycheck would just go towards peanut butter, and that's all I would buy, and that's all he would eat if it was up to him. So, but then he would get very, very fat. Can't have that. Like, and now we're just so what's happening now is that we're wading into stupid territory, right? Like it was always stupid, but now it's like extra stupid. Like, and it's extra stupid because like Elon Musk is a private citizen. The things he is doing are obviously illegal. He is obviously trying to coup the government. And I think that there are signs that he has absolutely done exactly that. To me, the big one, yeah, Elon Musk's private security detail deputized by U.S. Marshals Service. Like, so Elon Musk has a private military that he has deputized, which essentially means that his private military can act as a United States surrogate and do whatever. You've got stories like Donald Trump basically deleting the what's that registry called? It's the police offenders registry, right? You've got all of these stories coming out that basically show you that what these Republicans are doing and what Elon Musk is doing is essentially launching a private military force and essentially saying, hey, and they're doing that while simultaneously dismantling the military, right? So you have these stories of Elon Musk like deputizing his private military while they're simultaneously dismantling the military. Where do you think this goes? Like, where do you think this all ends up? How do you think this all, like, where's the bottom of this well, do you figure? I don't think there's much by way of figuring going on at the moment. I feel like the religious mindset of people is basically baked in at this point, and all consequences are individualized. So if something bad happens to you, it's your fault. It's just proof that God hates you. Simple as that. Garden State, how you doing? Jeff writes, I'm hopeful, thanks. Hope you're well. I mean, I don't know if I would use the word hopeful for myself personally, but we're careening forward. So this is an article that I actually really wanted to read right away. This is from Futurism. Economist warns that Elon Musk is about to cause a deep, deep recession. So this is something that I think we all kind of know, right? We all know that there is a recession happening. In fact, we've got pretty strong evidence that shows that most people, or at least a huge portion of the populace, feels as though they are already in a recession. Like when you've got articles like this coming out from the Wall Street Journal, right? The U.S. economy depends more than ever on rich people. Well, if you've got an article like that, that means that people who are not rich are living in a recession. And we've got half of Canadians and Americans think their countries are in a recession now. It completely tracks. right? If you have as much wealth disparity that exists in our country, if you have the amount of poverty that is persisting throughout the country, if you have the type of homelessness that exists in the country, that means that the people who are experiencing that are already in a depression. They're already in I mean, a recession is the softest possible way to say it. I would argue that if you're homeless living on the streets, you're living in a depression, right? Uh, uh, and the fact that there's no political force that actually cares about these people, there's no political force that's interested at all in alleviating poverty or alleviating homelessness. That the organizations that exist in order to tackle homelessness actually only exist to justify their own existences. That if they actually eradicated homelessness, they'd be out of a job, so they don't do it. And when you so really what we're talking about is, are like bankers and lawyers going to start feeling the recession, right? Garden State writes economic depression all over the global south for almost 500 years now at this point. Yeah, colonialism, right? Colonialism gets it done. And now we're going to colonize ourselves, right? We colonized the entire world, right? We colonized Asia for a long time. We colonized Africa. We colonized Latin America, and now those forces or those countries, those places are beginning the great pushback. They're beginning this big pushback where they're saying, no, we're not going to be colonial states. We're not going to be colonies of the United States, right? We're not going to accept that. And we're going to erect our own states and be independent of America. So America doesn't have anywhere else to go, right? It's steadily being isolated. And so, yes, America is colonizing itself, right? The wealth of America is basically going to turn its own states into the types of colonies that it was attempting and successfully for a long time, for decades and decades and decades and generations, to govern and rule over, right? That's what it's doing. Okay, buddy. Okay, you're being very, very fussy right now. And I would love it if you just stopped being so fussy. Yeah, I know, Milo. I know. You think that if you go over there, you can get more peanut butter, but no, it's finished. It's over. It's done. It happened. So, from Futurism, I'd like to read this because I want to hear from people who are saying specifically why, right? Like, specifically, why is it going to happen? I mean, if you cut everybody's pay, like if you cut Social Security, if you make it so people can't actually pay their bills, if you make it so that nobody has any money, right? Nobody can buy anything. Yeah, what do you think is going to happen? Like, what do you think is going to happen? And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how many billions and billions of dollars you give to 5 people. You know, they don't need the same amount of goods as 200 million people do. It's just that simple. And if your concern is economic activity and economic growth, then the absolute worst thing to be doing right now is cutting taxes for rich people who shouldn't exist in the first place, while simultaneously raising taxes on everyone else and cutting benefits for everybody else. Like, it's just psychotic. Like, it's a religious ideology, but that's what we're looking at. So, a professor and former Department of Labor economist is warning that unelected White House advisor and multi-hyphenate billionaire Elon Musk is sending the United States headlong into a huge recession. In a post on Blue Sky, Jesse Rothstein, a University of California, Berkeley public policy professor who was the DOL's chief economist at the start of the Obama administration, addressed the dire situation we could soon be facing. It seems almost unavoidable at this point, Rothstein wrote, that we are headed for a deep, deep recession. Between the hundreds of thousands of government jobs on the chopping block and the cancellations of countless federal contracts, The Economist noted that the upcoming employment reports are looking quite scary indeed. The March employment report, to be released April 4th, seems certain to show bigger job losses than any month ever, outside of a few in 2008 and 9 and 2020, the professor wrote in his multi-post thread. Add on to that the enormous private market uncertainty. How do you hire in these conditions? And this is going to be very, very bad. The basic idea is that higher unemployment leads to drops in consumer spending, which can slow economic activity and growth, which in turn leads to fewer hires, closing the recession circle. But there remains some uncertainty when it comes to what Musk's newfound role as federal spending slasher might mean for the economy. That's in large part due to the chaos Musk's so-called Department of Government Efficiency has wrought. As Rothstein points out, I worry that the U.S. Office of Personnel Management itself doesn't yet know how many workers were fired. It may be some time before it can report accurately to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. But the ripple effects of major hiring freezes could be very large, he argued. Universities and others are already instituting hiring freezes. Where the major job losses will leave the fate of the U.S. economy is in the short term remains to be seen. But chances are it won't be pretty. Even according to Musk himself, the billionaire said during a campaign stop for Trump just ahead of the election that America would likely be in for some financial hardship. The exact should he begin trimming the fat as he saw it. We have to reduce spending to live within our means. Fucking multi-billionaire whose entire fortune is based on subsidies. Like, you're paying for Elon Musk. Like, that's the part about the story that it blows me away that it's literally not said every single time Elon Musk's name is mentioned, right? Like, welfare baby, like apartheid welfare baby, Elon Musk, who you pay to have be a welfare baby, says that we have to trim the fat, right? Like, that's what makes this whole thing psychotic. Like, what are you talking about? And also, it's just like a fundamental misunderstanding of how government actually works. Right? It's treating government like it's a business, as if its citizens are clients, right? Like which is why these guys are just absolutely out of their mind psychotic, right? That instead of it being like, no, like we create money in order to organize a trade system with one another, but within that trade system, we can erect institutions to provide services to the public that they can interact with through the usage of money, but really will just provide that, and the money can just exist in the background. We don't need to get the money involved at all. And then along comes apartheid baby, welfare baby, Elon Musk, who goes, "But I could make all the money. The money for me would be good." And that's it. That's the start and end of the thinking, right? Like that, and that's true of all of these capitalists. It's literally just money, me, I could have me money good. And we'll make it efficient. Yeah, it's not efficient now. We could make it more efficient. And what's their idea of efficiency? Making your life harder, longer hours, less pay. That makes it more efficient somehow. We have to reduce spending to live within our means, Musk says, seemingly using the royal we to refer to the hoi polley, despite being a billionaire himself. And, that necessarily involves some temporary hardship, but it will ensure long-term prosperity. I just love that, like, the Elon stands, like the people who are just absolutely delusional and absolutely demented will actually eat shit. Like, they'll actually eat shit. They'll live in poverty. They'll lose their job, and they'll be sitting there going, "But it's for America. America!" Like, that's what's going to happen. You're going to have a whole bunch of, like, quote unquote patriots. Like, if you stand up and criticize Elon Musk, you're unpatriotic. Like, that's what these dimwits are going to say. They're literally going to be like, "Yeah, sure, I have to eat shoe leather, but it's for America." And meanwhile, Elon Musk is like running off with the bag. Like, it's crazy what's going on. It's entirely possible the billionaire's prediction may eventually come true. No. Like, I don't understand why you wrote that line. Like, if you steal all the money and take it out of America, How does that increase prosperity exactly? And as Rothstein suggests, the consequences of his fat trimming may be as bad or worse than the immediate cuts. To be clear, even greater damage will be done by the loss of federal government productivity, Rothstein wrote. The workers who are losing their jobs are worth more than they were being paid. We are all poorer when roads, planes, and food are unsafe, when parks are closed, etc. Yeah, like, I don't know how this doesn't result in just like a massive crash of huge, enormous proportions. Yeah, the drugs aren't helping either, for sure. Efficient for me, expenses onto the look. I make a homeless for a while, but we're going to Mars, baby. Yeah, right. Yeah, I'm so done with these cringe ketamine addicted losers. Yeah. Yeah, Elon reminds me of the salesman from the Simpsons episode who sold them a monorail. That's pretty much what's going on. Like, Elon Musk shows up, and it's just like, selling you a pie in the sky idea, right? Like, just connecting you to this idea, and like they're jamming your face full of Marvel movies, connecting you into like the abstract space, right? Where you're just like, wow, we could go to Mars, right? In the meantime, he's just like pocketing all the money, and then the moment you realize you've been swindled, he's already dead. Like, that's the part about it that's just going to be so great, is that Elon Musk is just going to die, right? As humans do. And then in like the autopsy of his life, we're all going to be like, this guy was a fucking Nazi. Like, this guy was like a straight up dyed in the wool apartheid Nazi. And we all just like watched him do it. It's crazy. Cotton goes, I can't say my feelings on those who lord lands. Yeah. Tithe unto Musk and your blessings in heaven will multiply. And like, I cannot overstate, and because the whole point we're here, like the whole reason why you guys come in here, I think, right? And you might have your own reasons and your own thoughts on this, but I think that we are all here because we know this thing is coming apart at the seams. We know that no one is interested in preventing it. We know that the only people who are actually speaking out against it in ways that can be described as serious are people who are so heavily on the fringes that they can't possibly take control and affect the type of changes that would need to occur in order to ensure the empire remains intact and ensure that the idea of America remains complete. Like, we're really here as like a solidarity group so that we can go out into the world and actually have a semblance and appearance of sanity. That, like, don't you feel like going into the world now with all that's going on and like talking to people like is itself an act of total insanity? Like, what the fuck are we doing? Why is everyone acting normal? Like, it's actually, that to me is the most batshit part about the whole thing. The most batshit part about the whole thing is that everybody's just walking around being like, oh, well, have a good day. Man, Mondays, eh? Oh, TGIF. And like, everybody's just like walking around being like normal. And it's and that's what's crazy, right? Like, it's got a real like Stepford Wives vibe where everybody's just like, hey, how was your weekend? Oh, I got up to the cottage. And they all seem fucking insane because they are insane, right? Like, we've just lost the thread completely. And there's still like a small percentage of people who, you know, have their cottage, have the life, you know, they go work their shitty job doing the task that's pointless and doesn't matter at all. and they get $100,000 a year, and that's the life they built for themselves, and so they're on this loop, and that's just how they're going to die, and that's fine. And if you say to them like, hey, maybe we should possibly change one thing, like maybe we should make a 0.01% change, even that's too much for them, right? Their brain is so broken, and they're so bought into the idea of individualism, like they're so hyper self-absorbed and so utterly disconnected from even the concept or the idea of community, that if you even suggested like, hey, maybe we should change things like 0.1%. Well, how are you going to pay for that? How are you going to pay for that? Elon's getting us to Mars. Like, they're so, like, dead. Like, they're already dead. Like, that's the part about it that I think is the most pathetic, right? That we, it's like we live among the dead. And there's all of these dead corpses walking around who all they're doing is just moving forward like a robot. Like, we're all afraid of AI coming in and taking over. The AI already took over, right? There's already an artificial intelligence that has taken over. It's the system of capital. And the people who have bought into it are basically just dead-brained walking corpses who have no souls even. They're just utterly they've just sacrificed, like, they mouth the words of individualism, but have completely sacrificed their individualism for total conformity to the capitalist state. And like, the people who are babbling on about individualism, are like the least individualistic people in the world. Like, they genuinely think that they are these rugged individualists, when it's like they're completely bought into a system that has changed itself and has configured itself into this death cult. We know it's a death cult. We know at this point. What else could it be? Right? It's not based on reason. It's not based on rational thinking. Like, what Elon Musk is doing is not rational, right? There's just no reason to want to pursue the things that he's pursuing. Like, why does he want to do the things that he wants to do? Why does he want to run the Department of Government Efficiency? Like, why does he want to dismantle these government organizations so that he can privatize them? Like, what is he doing? What's the point of it? What's the goal? Is it just this, like, desire to stand atop the heap? Is it just this supremacy thing? It's just power? Yeah. Like, but it's insane. Like, this is kind of my larger point. It's just like, it's just insane what not only what he is doing, but what we are permitting him to do. Like, there is an entire like religious modus operandi, an entire way of thinking that is hyper religious, hyper emotional. You can see it whenever Ben Shapiro talks, right? Like, I've got this article here where Ben Shapiro is actually responding to Bill Burr's what is now an infamous billionaire rant. And it's just the same kind of dead-brained garbage that you expect from a loser like Shapiro, who is the most unintellectual person that exists. He's hyper-religious bigot, right? He says, apparently, according to Bill Burr, simply earning a lot of money in the United States or anywhere else means that you should be murdered. So right there, his hyper-religious mind has disconnected from reality completely. Like, he actually thinks billionaires earn money. Like, no billionaire anywhere at any time at any point has ever earned even a single dollar for themselves. Like, they literally withhold resources from people unless we work for them. We make that money for them. right? That's what makes this whole situation so infuriating, is that religious acolytes of this death cult, such as Ben Shapiro, are for some reason still taken seriously, in spite of all of the evidence that their false idols and false gods are obviously destroying us and don't actually operate the way they say they do. It's insanity. And it's just insanity at the highest possible level. And the thing that's got me the most like pissed off right now, in fact, is that the people who are supposedly the quote unquote resistance to all of this, right? Like your Jon Stewarts, right? Are just loser liberals who have no actual solutions. Who like your Bernie Sanders types who are just standing there being like, you know what we should do? We should make sure the ruling capitalist class still has power and authority over our lives, but maybe make it so that they have to pay for a healthcare system. So it's just the most embarrassing. Like, wasn't America the country that was like throwing tea? Like, wasn't there the Boston Tea Party? Wasn't there the whole no taxation without representation? Like, wasn't there this whole revolution that happened, like the American Revolution and all of this? Isn't that like baked into your lore? And you did it all just so you could suck a bunch of billionaire cocks and then just become like a new aristocracy, just watch like a new aristocracy get erected in front of your eyes. Like it's insanity. And we're just gonna go along with it. It looks like it's gonna happen, and everybody is just gonna be like perfectly fine with that. No, it's totally normal to have hundreds of thousands of people living in homeless shelters and encampments across your country. That's completely normal, right? It's completely normal to have all of this poverty, and it's completely normal to have a bunch of people who and it's completely normal to have like an education system that's been completely dismantled, to have illiteracy rule your country, right? Like it's completely normal. And it's this normalization of this, and the part that just kills me the most, the part that absolutely kills me the most, is that the least capable, least intelligent, least moral, least ethical people are the ones who think that they're the best. And the proof of that is that they've stolen so much money. Look how much money I've stolen. Like, look how much wealth I've hoarded for myself. I must be good, right? And there's just no concept of community. There's no concept of universally good for the community. Like, there's no such thing as a communal good. It doesn't exist. There's no such thing as addressing like universal concerns, or even the idea that there may even possibly be communal concerns. And everything is essentially just boiled down to how much money can I make? And it's insane. This is why I think straight up limiting the amount of wealth a single person is allowed to have, just like as a hard and fast rule, like a hard capped rule. Like, too bad. You cannot go past this point. And if somebody complains about it, we literally put them in a re-education camp. And we just say, bye, like, you have to go to school now for 4 years to learn how to be base ethical, like base empathy, you need to have a base understanding of what it means to live in in reality, right? And to have neighbors, and to actually say to your neighbors, yeah, I don't want to enslave you, right? And to convince and to live in a society that understands first and foremost and fundamentally that the only reason people want to accumulate wealth is to enslave other people. That's the only reason, full stop, period, is to force people to do something they would not do otherwise. That is the entire purpose of wealth hoarding, and there is no other reason to hoard wealth besides that. Full stop, period. And until we live in a society that's actually willing to say out loud that, yeah, like if you want $1,000,001, we consider you to be a slaver, so you don't get any more than that. Just straight up, full stop. You have $1,000,000, great, you're done. Finished. It's over. Thanks for playing. right? You don't also get to buy the society. You don't get to buy elections. You don't get to own massive multinational media conglomerates. Tough shit. And if you do, you're not welcome here. Like, we don't want you. Like, this is the part about it that I just think we need to get over. Is the full understanding that wealth hoarding by its very nature is evil. Even if the person who is hoarding the wealth is well intentioned, right? Even if the person hoarding the wealth is well intentioned, the act of hoarding the wealth is itself demonic. And until we recognize that and realize that and do something about that in a big and significant way, we're just going to be in this perpetual state of collapse, which is exactly what we're looking at. Joe writes, I tell people we don't even really need money anymore. How few things get wasted as much as food and housing. Yeah, like, really, when you think about it, like, you could erect an institution, a crown corporation, here in Canada. That's what we would call it, a crown corporation. And it would be like the infrastructure crown corporation. Its entire task would be to maintain housing and maintain infrastructure. And you could just fold all your construction into that. And they would have to operate, and they would basically be responsible for your quote unquote landlording, right? For fixing up buildings, for fixing up tenancies, for fixing up all the stuff, for maintaining everything, right? And of course, everybody would have to, like, pay people to actually do that, but it wouldn't be to the degree that we're paying rent, certainly, right? Like, it would absolutely not be this expensive to pay for rent. Wouldn't be expensive to have property taxes. It wouldn't be expensive to have all of this, like, and landlords are just parasites. They provide no value whatsoever. And so at least you'd be paying rent to people who are actually doing the work and actually doing the jobs, as opposed to these landlords you never meet, who are just absolutely worthless, and provide negative value into your society. And you could do that with pretty much everything, right? Like, we did it with our healthcare system here in Canada. We just straight up said, like, yeah, doctors, like, if you want to have a hospital, that's going to be part of the government, and we're going to have a single payer healthcare system, and that's going to make sure that prices stay low, healthcare is affordable, and why is it falling apart? Because conservatives defund it, right? Conservatives make everybody's jobs harder, and we all just watch them do it. And there just comes a point where if you continue doing this, if you continue making sure that your basic necessities and the basic aspects of, like, your education system, right, are actually taken care of, and people don't need to, like, nickel and dime and individualize all those kind of stuff, like, you could do this with the food distribution network. You could do this with everything. There just comes a point where everybody, like, why do you even need money? Just go in and get the food you need and walk out. Like, and this idea that, oh, well, if you do that, people will take more than they need and hoard. It's like, yeah, that's what a billionaire would say. Or that's why we should eradicate billionaires, because this billionaire style thinking is infecting our society like a disease. Like these people have brain damage. Like, Elon Musk is brain damaged. Like, you understand? Like, that's fundamentally what we're experiencing. We're experiencing this massive, enormous mental health crisis. And the mental health crisis is in people like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and Warren Buffett and Bill Gates. They have brain damage. They're brain damaged. And we've given them all the power in the society. It's just crazy to me. JT writes, I think it'd be neat to make it like the movie Speed. If you somehow hold more than 1 million, Hull, good to see you. The capitalists aren't patriotic. They value individualism above everything. Yeah, they're selfish. Like, I love that we have this, like, philosophical type term for it, right? individualism. It's just selfishness. It's just a little boy that never grew up. It's literally just a little boy being like, I could have all the cookies. That's it. That's it. It's not a philosophy of thought. It's just a child that doesn't grow up. And anybody who writes big, flowery dissertations and long prose about individualism is only doing so that they can cover for the fact that their quote unquote ideology is actually very simple, because it's the ideology of a 2-year-old. They just never grew up. They just want more stuff. That's it. That more is better. More is good. More money, more properties, right? Bigger is better. More. And you can see it with like their fucking dumbass super yachts they keep building. Just over and over again, they keep building these big ass, dumbass, ridiculous super yachts that are just like the size of towns and cities. That it takes thousands of people to run and operate these things. Why? It's stupid. Like, it's the thing a stupid person would do, because we're essentially governed by brain damaged children who just are like, big good. They like walked up to a guy and the guy was like, oh, for $200 million, I can make a boat as big as a building. And they went, whoa, a boat as big as a building. That's what's happening. And we're just in for it. DM over on Twitch. Good to see you, my man. Good evening, John. Liberal candidate Karina Gould is now yelling basic income as her main talking point in her platform, as she will in tonight's debate. However, she voted down basic income and fall. Yeah, the hypocrisy is beyond repulsive. Yeah, like fascists are opportunists. Big fucking surprise. Like these people are all opportunists. Like there's no such thing as like a politician that actually gives a shit about the things that are coming out of their mouths. Right? That doesn't exist. Like this is just the most clumsy version of what I've been talking about the whole time, right? This is like just somebody who's like been voting down basic income, but now they see like, maybe it'll get me power. Basic income, they'll say, and of course they'll never put it in, because politicians never do that. That's not how they operate. They're fraudulent liars to an individual. And it's just the most clumsy version of it. There are people who are better at it, right? Like I would say that Bernie Sanders is like an expert at doing this, where he knows what people want to hear in order to galvanize them in the way that like Hulk Hogan, right? Like Hulk Hogan comes out and does the thing, right? And flexes and rips the shirt and everybody's like, yeah! But it's all just a fucking show, right? These people are amoral psychos who are selling you out in front of your eyes constantly. And for some reason, we just keep rebuying in. And I think it's this like mania and this desire that people have for that. Even now, people are like, there's got to be a solution. We just need to vote harder. Just vote blue, no matter who. We just gotta be able to. And it's and at this point, it's just a mania. It's just manic. It's just watching somebody who's obviously in hysterics having a panic attack because they don't want to actually bite down on the bullet that the system is done. Like it's over, it's finished, it's complete. There's no coming back. It like you're not gonna walk over to the liberals or the Democrats and have them solve this problem, right? Because they're not going to. They're going to manage the decline. That's their job. That's their goal, right? The goal of every liberal in the West, every liberal to an individual, right? That includes Bernie Sanders, that includes AOC, that includes Jeremy Corbyn, that includes Jagmeet Singh, right? Their job and their task and what it is that they want to accomplish, that they'll tell you they're trying to accomplish, is to manage the decline of Western civilization. They want to manage it, right? Whereas the right wing is just like, just pull the Band-Aid off. Just rip this shit off. Why are we managing the decline? Just rip it right off. And people who are given the choice between this slow, insipid, ridiculous management of decline versus the Band-Aid ripoff are choosing the Band-Aid ripoff, right? And they're choosing the Band-Aid ripoff because it's like, well, maybe it'll be over faster. Maybe we will see prosperity on the other end. Maybe it will happen, rather than my entire life being this slow, steady, insipid, pathetic decline into nothingness. Maybe it'll be like a big phenomenal crash followed up by like a rising from the ashes. Like but the idea that we're actually going to see any politician anywhere in the West at all get connected into the electoral system and actually even pretend as though they're going to do any kind of meaningful change. Like, they're just cosplaying, right? They're just cosplaying. That the only thing that we should be doing at this point is organizing ourselves to seize productive capacity in our local communities. And that's it. Like, full stop. Like, there's no reason to participate in the idea that there is such a thing as America or California or even your county. Like, these people have failed on a level that cannot be fully embraced and fully articulated. And our imaginative selves, when we get into our abstract spaces and we imagine the path through this into the future, we immediately just fall back into the well-worn ruts of just gotta go vote for a system that's abandoned us. Gotta go vote. It's like you were thrown overboard off of a boat. And you go, oh, we just gotta get back on the boat. We just gotta get back on the boat. Boat's gone. Boat's gone. You have been fully abandoned. Boat's gone. You're not coming back. It's not going to circle back around. You're floating in the ocean by yourself. Abandonment. And you can't even see the boat on the horizon anymore. And you're still bobbing away in the water, being like, we just gotta get back on the boat. We just gotta get back on the boat. Nah, baby. It's time to look around you. It's time to look at the wreckage, right? It's time to find floating shit. It's time to cobble it all together, right? It's time to find other survivors who are around you, and it's time to build up. And it's time to begin producing locally with the people who are around you, and to create trade networks with the people who are around you, because that's what's going to survive the wreckage. That's what's going to survive the wreckage. And the idea that we're suddenly going to like vote in liberals or Democrats and it's going to matter, right? And it's going to have like a big, suddenly everything will be fine and your wages will go up and there'll be stability. Like, nah, none of them are even interested in that. Like, they don't care about that even a little. Like, even a little. Like, the people who are in power for their own paychecks and literally nothing else. So I don't know why anybody thinks we should participate in this. And of course liberals are going to stand, like, just like how Justin Trudeau stood up and said he was going to do electoral reform. Remember how that happened? Right? Like, they're going to lie to you. They're going to lie to your face so that they can be the ones to get the power. That's it. And that's all they care about. They definitely do not care about Canada, and they certainly do not care about you. So just stop talking about it. Stop thinking about it. Stop pretending as though the political leadership of this country is actually interested in being political leadership, because they're not. They're just not. They are irrelevant to your lives now. Like, that's the part about it that I think, like, even I need to embrace more fully in my life. Like, the people who are living next door to you matter 100 billion times more politically than Mark Carney, than the liberals or the conservatives or the Republicans and the Democrats now, because they're off to Mars, right? They're living in Elon land. Like, the people who matter are the people who live in your building. Those are the people who matter. and it's just gonna and it's just going to get more dramatic, and it's just going to get more obvious, and it's just going to get more desperate. Like this isn't going to stop, right? And it's not going to stop if the Democrats get in, and it's not going to stop if the liberals get in, and it's not going to stop. It's just going to continue, because everybody across the spectrum, every single person, every single commentator is saying, yeah, but we need to maintain the system of capital. So it's like the house is on fire, and instead of saying we need to extinguish the fire, they're saying, well, we just need to keep building faster. We just need to keep building faster. And if we build higher, we'll be able to outrun the fire. Like, that's where we're at. It's manic, it's crazy, it's insane. It is a religious ideology. It is not rooted in reality. And so, like, I'm willing to, like, comment a little bit on what these politicians are saying and doing, but only to point out that they're fraudulent liars who are obviously lying to you, to an individual. No exceptions. Absolutely no exceptions. So there's my big rant for you, bud. Hope you're doing well out there. Monsieur, good to see you. Most of Europe caught in a liberal centrist trap. Yeah, which is going to collapse, right? Because these liberals are pathetic losers who are just managing the decline. And so you are just going to watch yourself get poorer and poorer and poorer and poorer. Yeah, your dollar is going to buy less. You're going to have less impact in your society and what's around you. Your belt is going to get tight. You're not going to be able to afford housing. You're not going to be able to afford food. You'll barely be eking it by while working a job and a half or two jobs, right? Unless you, like, really pare down your life and you literally just live in a room with other roommates and things like that, right? But the idea that you're going to, like, own a home, like, it's over, it's done, it's finished, it's complete. And so people are going to swing hard to the right because the right wing is actually offering solutions, right? They're bad solutions. Like, they're bad solutions that don't work, and we know they don't work, but they're actually solutions. They're acknowledging that something is happening, right? They're acknowledging the phenomenon. And then they're saying, and here are solutions. And they're bad solutions that don't work, but they're at least solutions. Meanwhile, like, liberal centrists are like, no, the economy's doing great, like Biden did. The economy's never been better, like Biden did. And then because they say the economy's doing so well, they have no solutions whatsoever, because they refuse to acknowledge that, no, in fact, half of us think that we're already in a recession. Like, so there's a disconnect in reality there. Because, again, the job of the liberal is not to improve your life at all. The job of the liberal is to manage the decline. That's their only job. That's the only thing they do. And so all of our politics is just performative now. There's literally not a single individual who's interested at any moment in improving the quality of your life. At best, they're just interested in convincing you that they're interested in improving the quality of your life, but they're not. They're frauds and liars to an individual. Like, the mayor of every single city is a fraudulent liar of the highest order, who's going to, like, burn in Dante's sixth circle of hell. Like, absolutely. Yeah, JT nailing it, right? A $5 rebate on new carpet for the house fire that is ongoing. Woohoo, yeah. Juan Buchanan, right? I'm tired of talking to liberals that don't get that America is crumbling regardless if Kamala won or not. We're cooked. Yeah. Look, here, if you ask me, right here, clip this, okay? This is why the West will collapse and fail at the highest possible level. This is the number one reason. The people who are in power are espousing a religious ideology as if it is a science, right? It's like we are getting our mental health studies from phrenologists, and the people who are like the head of Harvard, the head of Oxford, the head of the Chicago schools, the president of the United States, the prime minister of Canada, the wealthiest people, all of the newspapers, all of the schools are all completely packed and filled to the gills with people who are espousing a religious ideology and who refuse to be confronted by reality. And those are the people who are in those positions. They are training people in the religious ideology, and the religious ideology is being baked into the next generation of governors and rulers. So we will never get away from the religious ideology of capitalism, which I have articulated a million times on this channel. Worship of the self, worship of money, and worship of chaos. Just this trifecta of just masturbation, self-worship. Like a guy like Elon Musk is just the absolute apex and epitome of this. Just a person who spreads around as much chaos as possible to extract as much wealth for himself. And as long as it makes him rich, then it's ultimately good. And this is leading to a massive, major decline of the West. And none of the leadership, even if they were interested in improving the society, which they're not, but even if they were, they wouldn't know how to, because they're fundamentally moronic, illiterate, like pathetic losers who, even if they do acknowledge that reality exists, they're too cowardly to actually do anything about it. Like that's who's governing us, and that's who will continue to govern us, right? That if somebody shows up and is actually like, we should get rid of these capitalists, they're obviously parasites. Like, it's obviously failing, like it's obviously not working. Well, then that person will be gone. And it really is that simple. Like, it really is that simple. JT writes, austerity plus conscription and military spending in place of anything else. Yeah. Because it's all just about, like, they're just dragons protecting their pile of hoarded gold that they quote-unquote earned by having all the rest of us do the work for food. Like, that's the thing that blows me away about these guys, is that they would be living in the Confederate South talking about how, well, you can't punish plantation owners. They worked so hard, they earned it. Right? Like, the concept of slavery is just not part of the conversation at all. It's just not part of what they are. It's not part of what they're doing. Right? They don't view the people who are enslaved as people. They're just commodities. Right? That's how you can convince yourself that billionaires are have earned it. You can convince yourself that billionaires have earned it because they bought and sold commodities. They bought and sold people, right? Simple as that. What time is that debate tonight? I don't even know what debate you're talking about, Oddity. Gavin Roy? I don't know if I've even seen you here, Gavin. Good to see you. Gavin says, if it worked. I don't know what that's in reference to, Roy, but welcome. JT writes, you'll either be trying to work being homeless or thinking the military or policing is going to put you on the right side. Yeah. Like, it's just, and like, we're constantly bombarded by propaganda, right? We're constantly just like blaring into our faces as much as possible. And the most effective propagandists in the society right now are the ones that people don't think are propagandists, right? Like, I'm gonna rail on Jon Stewart again. Like, Jon Stewart is an effective propagandist. Like, when I was a kid, and he was talking during the a war on terror and all of that, I actually thought that, like, oh yeah, here's a guy who's actually working against the power structure and blah 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 and so on and so forth. What a free country and all this. Jon Stewart is part of the power structure. His job is to funnel you into the dead end of the Democratic Party. That's his whole job. He doesn't have any other task than that, which is why his takes on capitalism and his takes on foreign policy are absolutely in lockstep with the Republican Party, even the MAGA crowd. Like, you're allowed to have any opinion you like in America, right? As long as your opinion is that capitalism is the best system we have, right? Roy writes, capitalism has its issues, but that communism hasn't worked. I mean, communism has obviously worked, though. Like, that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about the propaganda, Roy, right? Like here's the truth, okay, Roy? And I'm going to say it as nicely as I can, as gently as I can, and I'm not trying to be condescending or dismissive of you, okay? The best thing for you to do right now, and I really strongly encourage you to do it, really and truthfully, look into a mirror if you have to, is to really say to yourself in this moment right now, I don't know anything about communism. And I want you to actually say it, and I want you to, it's like out loud so you can hear your own voice say it in your own ears. Because you got to break through the absolute bullshit propaganda that you have been spoon-fed by a culture that's doing everything it can to destroy you. It absolutely does not want you to look at alternative systems. It absolutely does not want you to learn anything about alternative systems or countries where communism has been 100% successful. It does not want you to learn anything about communist experiments. It does not want you to learn anything about basic history. It doesn't want you to learn any of that. It wants you to keep espousing this nonsense that you are espousing, which is rooted primarily and fundamentally in the reality that you actually don't know anything about communism. But you're convinced you do. And until you actually break through, and until you actually say to yourself, you know what? I actually don't know anything about communism. All I know about communism is what I've seen in the newspapers. And Cotton's doing us the favor, right? Like, communism was massively successful in China up to the modern era, but even Mao was massively successful for China. Modern day China could not exist without the communists. Full stop. Full stop. You don't, even if you want to buy into the lie that China is where it is now because of capitalism, which is just an atrocious garbage lie, all of that is built off of the work that the communists did under Mao. Like, you literally don't get modern China without the communists. Full stop, period. Yeah, you've got the Vietnamese communists, you've got the Cubans, right? Like, the Cubans literally were living in slavery before the communists showed up. I mean, yeah, if you want to talk about the Soviet Union, like, the Soviet Union was literally living under a Tsar who was launching, like, failed wars and, like, rounding up Jews. Like, Jesus Christ. I don't love capitalism, but as a system, communism has not shown to work. It collapsed ugly. Where? Like, if you're talking about the dissolution of the Soviet Union, right? Like, it's a charming story to say that, like, yeah, communism, it didn't work and so it collapsed, while completely ignoring, like, the basic historical evidence of what actually happens in the Soviet Union. Like, but I don't want to go off on the Soviet Union tangent unless you're actually talking about the Soviet Union. Yeah, Kewell, good to see you, by the way, bud, writes, capitalism is stripping the population from its political and economic rights and offering that to 1 or 2 or 3% of the population. It's a disguised dictatorship, and Musk confirms, yeah, it's what communists would call the dictatorship of the bourgeoisie, right? That you don't actually have rights, you don't actually have access to anything unless you are in the bourgeoisie, right? Unless you are the people who own the means of production and withhold the benefits of the means of production from the populace in exchange for their labor, which is what capitalism really is. It's just a wage slave system. And it's all it's ever been, right? That's actually the best capitalism has ever been, right? Capitalism used to just be slavery. It just used to kick in people's doors, grab them, and throw them down mine shafts. Like, that's what capitalism was. For most of its history, that's what it was. And it required like a major, massive civil war in order to get it away from just owning people. Roy writes, in the government, most people don't work as hard and late. So this is just bullshit, right? This is just bullshit propaganda. Like, you've conned yourself and convinced yourself, and you're just going along with the nonsense that life's supposed to be hard and full of suffering. Even if the government work was easier and more laid back, like, your response to that as being bad is weird. Life should be good. We should have a nice time. Sorry, you're not. Like, and it's just weird that the response should be, we should make everything harder for everyone. It's just a very strange, odd, unusual worldview to have. And yet it seems so predominant. And that the fundamental purpose of existence is to have high productivity for people you've never met. It's just an extremely, extremely odd, strange, detached worldview. That the purpose of life is to work as hard as possible before you just die. Like, what like get to the beach, my man. Like, get to the beach. Like, ask the flowers how productive they are. Ask the squirrels how productive they are. Look at the eagles fly and ask how productive they are. Like, what isn't the whole promise of a civilization and of a society that it makes your life easier? Isn't that the whole promise? And yet there's this pernicious, absurdist, ridiculous worldview, this religious ideology going around that is actually trying to convince me and convince other people and convince you that no, actually the purpose of existence and reality is grind set. Work as hard as you possibly can, Bugatti. It's stupid. It's a dumb way to look at the world. Like, we should be waking up every single day and be as chill as we possibly can and enjoy ourselves as much as we possibly can, as often as we possibly can. This mania for productivity, this mania comes from people who do no work in the first place, which are capitalists, who are dead set on convincing you that the thing you should be doing and the only way you should value your life, the only way you should value your life is by making me money. If you make me money, you're valuable, you're seen, you're worth keeping around. But if you don't want to make me money, then you're a lazy loser who should be thrown out. Get a job, you bum. Like, the whole thing is defined by somebody who is enslaving you through your wage so that they can go fuck off to Jeffrey Epstein's pedophile island, so that they can just go golfing with Donald Trump, so that they can live in a mansion somewhere in the Hamptons and surround themselves by guards and make sure that the dirty poors are kept away. And so that they can shoot themselves into rockets into space and tell everybody, like, yeah, you did it for me, guys. So that they can get the $100 billion in subsidies and then tell everybody that they're the parasites. Like, what's this fucking worldview you've got? What's this self-loathing, self-hating, this despicable, flagellating worldview that says, my life is to suffer. Suffering is good. Fuck that. Fuck that. We're supposed to enjoy ourselves. Or at the very least, live in contentment, which is the poison of capitalism. That's the true poison to capitalism. If capitalists roll up on a society that is fully content with itself, capitalism dies at its feet. Because a fully content society won't exploit each other. A fully content society can't be sold garbage for nothing. A fully content society, when confronted with the idea of, hey, you should exploit that cobalt mine you have there, will go, why? For what purpose? To what end? For what goal? In order to achieve what? And if the answer is profit, well, a fully content society will be like, well, what does it profit a man if he inherits the whole world but loses his soul? And we're selling our souls every single fucking day to the grind set. Work hard. For what? To what end? For what purpose? We're constantly banging on about increasing efficiency. But nobody actually asks the question, isn't it terrible to be incredibly efficient at something that should never be done? When are we actually going to ask, should we even be doing these things? Is it even valuable for us to do this? And if it's not valuable, or even worse, if it's harmful, we certainly shouldn't be doing it efficiently. Yeah, half our work today is distraction, producing movies, games, series, sports. Well, and it's all gatekeeping, right? It's all just wedging in. Like, people will do these things. People will always produce art. People will always produce media. People want to do these things. Like, I would argue that they have to, right? That it just comes out of people. And the job of the capitalist is to act as a gatekeeper and to wedge themselves financially between the people who are producing and the people who are consuming, right? And a way that they have managed to do that most successfully is by being the distributors, right? They create a gatekeep, a wall, and then that acts as a filter, right? So if you produce art that is inherently anti-capitalist, well, guess what? It'll never be distributed. It'll just be completely held off. And every so often you see somebody leak through the cracks. You see something like that happen, right? Because the force of what they're creating gains traction all by itself, right? Like, that does happen. And so the capitalists can't be overwhelming in this way. But it's not like they're doing anything particularly valuable. Right? It's not, and in fact, I would argue that distribution, again, shouldn't be something that private interests and capitalists are gatekeeping. Should be something that is absolutely just set up in the community. That you go, hey, I produced this thing, here it is, and they just distribute it. Yeah, Con writes, I was a government employee. A normal day was 12 hours of living in 30-pound gear. Yeah. Peanut Butter Beatrice writes, excuse me, I'm a government employee. I work goddamn hard. Yeah, I feel like the people who are talking this way about government employees have never literally walked into any government building ever in their lives. Like, just go to, like, your service center and watch them for 10 minutes. Like, go to a Service Canada, right, or a DMV or wherever, right, and just watch these people. Watch what they're putting up with. Because if you're trying to tell me that dealing with the public is not a difficult job, then I think you're a stupid person. I think you might be that type of person who's too stupid to realize they're so stupid. Like, dealing with the public is amongst one of the most difficult jobs that exists. Public speaking is literally people's number one fear. When polled, number one fear, public speaking. That's above death. There are people in the society that if they had to choose, this is a Jerry Seinfeld bit, right? That if they were at a funeral, they'd rather be in the coffin than doing the eulogy. And yet you watch people who are doing it every single goddamn day, and you pretend like that's not difficult or draining or takes emotional energy or takes something away from somebody. Like the soul crushing reality of having to, like, you filled out Form A43B wrong. Okay, we'll just fix this up for you. Can you make sure that I just need to see that paperwork? Can we make sure? Okay, like these dots definitely connected. Okay, you're all good. All okay, you got it. No, sir, this isn't where you do that. Sir, this isn't where you do that. You're in the wrong place. Sir, you're in the wrong place. Sir, I cannot help you any farther from this. I can't help you, sir. No, sir, I'm not trying to impede you. I'm not trying to cause you any problems, sir. You're just in the wrong building. You need to go across the street. Take this form for, I know this is frustrating, sir, and I'm sorry, but all you're doing is holding things up now, sir. I've got 30 more people who are trying to get processed today, sir, and you're just in, like, do you think that's not work? Like, are you genuinely trying to tell me that you don't think that's work? Then you're too stupid to talk to. Like, but this is what our society is grinding into our brains. This is what our society is doing. This is what our society is doing to people, right? It's just convincing them that it's constantly driving wedges in the populace, right? If it's not black versus white, if it's not man versus woman, right? If it's not straight versus gay, right? It'll be government versus private. They're just constantly trying to draw lines and wedge people and put you in boxes and then pit those people against one another constantly, over and over and over and over again. And if they can find a way to divide you, they'll do it. They'll absolutely do it, as long as it keeps you looking at each other and not at them. Hull writes, our human brain is literally made to hack our way to live blissfully on Earth, but get brainwashed into work hard, and maybe you'll get that Louis Vuitton bag. Yeah. And that Louis Vuitton bag, that'll be it. That'll be the thing. That's the tipping point. Juan writes, and all wage slavery is to just make someone else, such as the wealthy, richer. Yeah. They're benefiting just for sitting on their behind and exploiting those that work for them. Well, and the worst type of billionaire is, in fact, this Elon Musk guy, right? That Elon Musk, like, because he walks around and says things, he has this overinflated sense of ego. He actually thinks that he's productive, when the truth is that he's in the way of everybody's productivity. Like, everybody would be much more productive and everything would be going on a lot better without him. Right? Like, here's my absolute favorite. Here's my absolute favorite. Oh, come on. I had it right in front of my face. I'm a professional. I'm a professional. I'm a professional. Author of upcoming Elon Musk biography says, there is no evidence billionaire has any intellectual achievements. The guy who is doing his biography is like, what's he actually achieved? Elon Musk's great achievements are doing things that the United States government already did in the 60s. We landed on the moon. Cool. Like, we did that. Yeah, it's a pathological sickness. Let's evolve a bit. Look, if I could leave my mark on this conversation and really, like, there's a couple of things that I'd really love to just, like, plant a stake in the ground and have everybody actually, like, the zeitgeist energy just swirl around. It is the reality, the hard reality that wealth accumulation gives people brain damage. I say that shit and I worry that people think I'm saying it hyperbolically. I worry that people think I'm saying that offhandedly, like I would say something like they're demonic, right? That's hyperbolic. That's obviously narrative storytelling, right? When you accumulate power and wealth, you get brain damage. That's just every single time we've looked at it, every single time we've studied it, that's what the researchers walk away with. They walk away saying, yeah, they have brain damage. It damages your frontal cortex in the center where you keep your ability to have empathy. So let's start actually talking about these guys the way that they actually are, which is brain damaged child babies. Like they never grew up. Like they're just daddy's good little boy and they've got brain damage. Probably exactly like their dad does. Kevin Roy continues, overwork is a problem, and there can be measures to be taken to reduce it in capitalism. Ha 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 ha. Like ha 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 ha. Like capitalists were putting children down mine shafts. And it wasn't capitalists that said we should stop putting children down mine shafts. It was labor unions that did that. Right? It was the hard work done by labor unions, socialists, and communists that got that out of the system. Right? And people had to die for it. The coal mining strikes that happened throughout America were literally wars where they would send in the Pinkertons. You should look up the Pinkertons and learn something about the history of the labor union movement in the United States and the Wobblies, right? And like the idea that capitalists are somehow ever going to reduce your work hours is a total fucking joke. And it's this elimination of the basic history of the labor union movement as well as communism that leads people to say, but capitalism did these things. No, as XD says in the chat, these things happened in spite of capitalism, not because of them. That if it was up to the capitalists, your children would be working in coal mines. And that's what would be happening. Low observable goat over on Twitch. Good to see you. Yeah, glad they provided so many material examples of capitalists reducing overwork. Yeah. Well, but all of their examples are going to be the same thing, right? They're going to suggest an example, and it's literally going to be them just confessing and admitting in front of all of us that they don't know anything about the labor union movement. They don't know anything about communism. They don't know anything about the history of socialism, right? They think that capitalists are just bestowing goodness upon us because they're competing with one another. Oh, if the capitalist overworks somebody, then they'll just walk across the street to the other capitalist job. Capitalists don't talk to one another and collude with one another and ensure that they're following similar policies together at the clubs they all attend. That's not something that happens. Juan writes, and the wealthy is already planning for AI and robots to replace most jobs at the workplace. This is how you know this group of capitalists are stupid. Like this right here, what you've pointed out here, is how you know these guys are really fucking stupid. Like, if you were living in a society that was actually like, no, we need to take care of one another, and there should be empathy and compassion, and we should make sure everybody's, necessities are taken care of, then AI and robots makes a lot of sense, right? Get the AI and the robots to do like the heavy lifting and the difficult jobs, and think of all the interesting things that we couldn't do that previously, but we can now because we have like a robot, and even if we could manipulate the robot remotely, like it's great. And then if we could have like an AI that's with that and connecting in, like we could do all kinds of interesting things, right? In order to lessen the burden on us and increase our prosperity collectively. Yeah, absolutely. That sounds great. But in a capitalist system, AI and robots is a disaster It's a disaster for everybody. It's going to increase unemployment. And most importantly, this is the most important reason why it's a disaster for everybody. It's going to make it so that people won't be able to purchase the goods that the robots are producing. Like, how does a person get access to those goods if they don't get paid a wage for making those goods? It's all the robots making it. Well, then how do we get access to it? And in a wage slave system that says work or starve, the way that our system does, how do you get access? And so the capitalists are literally building a system that's designed to collapse and fail. They're morons. Like, they're deeply stupid people. Yeah, they're getting ready to replace us by making this capitalist system even more pointless. Yeah. Cotton writes, if we overstaffed the mines and oil wells, how hard would it really be? Efficiency to working people is achieving the goal for less effort. Well, and also, I don't know, like, what's with this speed mania? That we need to be doing what we're doing at this, like, rocket pace. Like, we should be thinking about achieving goals intergenerationally. Like, if your goal is to hurry up, let's do it as fast as possible. Let's do it as fast as possible. Maybe you'll, like, touch it, right? Maybe you'll actually get there and you'll touch it and you'll be like, I did it. But the moment you die, the thing falls apart, right? Because big organizations and big institutions don't actually exist through the force of personality. Like, literal human empires have fallen apart because they were based on the force of personality. Like, Alexander the Great's empire literally collapsed the day he died. It's not literally true, but, like, very shortly after his death, the Grecian Empire just collapsed because they were just like, it was based completely on the force of his personality. And building institutional power that is intergenerational is difficult and requires a lot of effort. And that's why capitalists don't want to do it, because capitalists are inherently lazy. Like, they're self-interested and lazy people who, like, I've got all these big ideas and everybody should worship me for my big ideas that you have to do. Like, go fuck yourself. You go do your idea. Yeah, capital thinks achieving the goal for less people is efficient. Well, it only matters if it affects them. Christopher De Silva, good to see you, my man. Nintendo going after mod creators is a great example of how toxic capitalism is. Yeah, a few people making something in homage of a work of art and the owners of the trademark punish you for it. Look, copyright by itself, the idea that there is copyright law is the death of culture and the death of our society. Like, someone creates something and people want to riff on it and create off of it, but they're not allowed to until, like, literally 80 years have passed. How is that anything other than cultural stagnation? How is that anything other than a culture that's just simply not allowed to have a reference of itself? Like, it's literally just, and how is that anything but ceding ultimate power, cultural power and hegemony to the wealthiest person in the room? That Disney gets to release whatever it wants to release into the society, but if you even stand up and say and criticize it, like, I can't do a proper breakdown of Disney movies on my YouTube channel, because to do that, I would have to show most of the movie, right? Like, to actually do, like, a proper criticism of, like, a Marvel movie or an actual criticism, like, I'm one of these guys that wants to be like, frame, talk about it, and then the next cut, pause, talk about it. Like, that's me. That's what I would be doing. But you're not allowed to, right? You're not allowed to. You can't do that. So it's just like total cultural stagnation and death across the board. And it's by design. You're not supposed to criticize the capitalists. They're supposed to be able to bombard anything they want to bombard on your face as often as possible, as much as possible. But if you even stand up and say, hey, I have some thoughts, just push you right out of the way. They'll just send a lawyer right at you. Kewell writes, I'll never understand these people. Do they see society declining? I mean, I like all empires, like the wealthy that live in Versailles, who are surrounded by guards and are in their gated communities. They see the decline. They don't care because they think they'll be immune from it. That's what it comes down to. That the American dream now is to build a life in which the consequences of you are insulated from the consequences of capital. But the truth is that there's no such thing, right? There's just no such thing as that. That as the thing gets torn apart at the seams, even the rich begin to suffer. You saw that most evidently and most obviously, by the way, under Roosevelt. Like, Roosevelt doesn't pass the New Deal because he's a good man who wants to do nice things for people. He passes the New Deal because there's thousands and thousands of people outside the White House calling for revolution. Like, it's under this threat of duress that the wealthy actually mobilize in order to do something positive for the society that they live in. Because to do otherwise is to court revolution. And until we're there, like until there's millions of people standing outside the White House basically being like, revolution, buddy, it's over now. Right? These billionaires are not going to do fucking anything. They're not going to do a goddamn thing. They're too psychopathic and brain damaged. XD writes, had pretty rude interactions with service center staff. They hate their job. Well, their job sucks. It's a terrible job, right? Like, and it's the kind of job that a person should only do like once a week. You know, like it's the kind of job that has to happen. It's the kind of thing that we need to have. But we're caught in this very manic 40-day work week, 8-hour day kind of constipated mindset, when really we should be sitting ourselves and being like, why don't we just have somebody come in like twice a week? Like they could come in Monday, Tuesday. We'll have like rotating staff, right? And just have them do this arduous, boring, stupid thing that nobody likes to do, but at a smaller level, right? I think you'd find that your model would be just as productive. The job would happen just as well, and everybody would be a lot happier, right? You just end up with a bunch of people being like, oh yeah, nah, it sucks to do, but like it's not so bad when you only have to do a little of it, right? That way it's more like doing a chore. Like it's more like, you know, cleaning your dishes. Nobody likes to do it. Nobody's sitting there being like, oh boy, golly gee, time to go clean the dishes. You just have to do it, right? But instead of organizing it, like if your whole fucking life was cleaning dishes, if you were doing that 40 hours a week, 8-hour days, yeah, you'd have a miserable time. But if you only had to do it like 6 hours a week, right, you'd be fine. And then you go live a nice life and everything would be fine. But we're just too busy kowtowing to these losers who hate us and hate themselves to get anything done about it. Joe writes, maybe in a sense he's important, but he helped accelerate collapse. I don't know who he is in that, but I assume you're talking about Musk. Kanye West. Yeah, Kanye West is like, he not only has the brain damage of wealth, but he's also struggling with other things. I don't want to give it a name because I don't know what it is, but like I have cousins who have bipolar, and I've seen them fully crash out. Like I know what they look like when they're not on their meds. And, you know, I see Kanye West and I'm just like, yeah, this guy looks like he's bipolar. Like, he looks like he might be maybe even schizophrenic. Like, it looks like there's something else going on there. Like, some of the things that he's doing and the back and forth that he's having on Twitter recently, where he's like, "I'm a Nazi. No, I'm not. Yes, I am." And he's just like, clearly there's a duality going on. And like that video he posted where he was literally wearing a shirt with a swastika on it while saying like, while speaking in this very like tone like this, it's like, "I didn't like what you said there, bud." It's like, yeah, man, like something's not like the cylinders are not all lighting, you know, like there's things are not triggering properly for that guy. And it just kind of bothers me that we as a people are not being more sincere and serious about something that I think is quite sincere and quite serious, which is billionaires with mental illnesses. Like if the captain of your ship was talking the way that Kanye or Elon was talking, your doctor would say, "You're not fit. Like, step down." Right? But we just don't have a mechanism to do that in our society, where we're like, "Yeah, you're unfit. Like, you definitely cannot do this. Step down." And it is absolutely based on the fact that these people are mentally ill and like drug addicts. Like Elon Musk's ketamine addiction is so obvious at this point. You have to be absolutely fooling yourself. But there's still people walking around pretending like these guys aren't doing the fucking Nazi salute, right? So the delusion just runs deep and self-reinforces, and it all just piles into this idea of just worshiping power and worshiping wealth. Like, they're rich, therefore they're good, and everything's completely fine and in hand. Gavin Roy writes, "A bigger problem is barely doing the work, working but not putting in the effort, and needed creativity. Humans need motivation to work, which happens to be the case of socialism." I literally don't know what you're talking about. Like straight up, like that kind of comment is exactly what I'm talking about, Roy. Like, I absolutely have no fucking idea what you're talking about. Like, humans do not need the profit motive to do things, right? Humans are motivated by lots of things. Sex is a big one, right? People want to have sex. People want to be respected in their community, right? People want to be liked. People want to have friends, right? People want community. People want the admiration of the people who are around them. People want to feel like they're participating in something and want to feel like they're doing something valuable. Like, when we talk to people who are on their deathbed at the end of their life, you know what nobody says? "I wish I had made more money." You know what everybody says? "I wish I had spent less time at work and more time with my family." Like, this sort of this religious ideology you have, this worldview that you have, that where you have convinced yourself that, oh, socialism is a problem because it actually reduces productivity, but it's fake. First of all, it's completely fake. Like, it's utterly false. Like, the Soviet Union defeated the capitalists in World War II. How did they do that? They had better productive capacity. You can literally read about the Nazis, like, when they write about it. They straight up said, "We didn't expect them to be able to produce that much." So what are you talking about? I think that this just stems from my initial comment with you, which is that you don't actually know anything about the subject. And all you're doing is just sort of vomiting out the old CIA propaganda, more or less. And then also putting forward the idea that it's more valuable to have a compliant workforce that gets things done quickly for me than it is to have a good society and a good group of people who are happy. Like, can I like, God's honest truth? Yeah, I'll wait a couple of more days to get my iPhone delivered if it means somebody's just like, Yeah. Hey, how you doing, Bob? Oh, cool. Let's move the parcel over here. Okay, cool. Well, see you later. Like, if those people are having a good life, yeah, I'll wait. It's fine. Like this sort of this manic, like, go have it. Like this looks like a you problem. You're just making it our problem. Like, slow down. Go outside. Touch fucking grass. Yeah, and then there's just the reality. Like, Hull is nailing this too. That plenty of jobs don't contribute to society. Low Observable Goat mentioned the book Bullshit Jobs. David Graeber, God rest his soul. I wish he was still with us. He wrote this great book, Bullshit Jobs. And in it, he just pointed out that, like, huge percent, I think he pegged the number 30%. Something like 30% of the jobs that we have are just pointless. They just don't do anything. And he talks pretty broadly about them. But we're living in this sort of manic society that has decided that if you don't work, you starve. And who gets to define what work is? Right? Who is defining what is or is not work? Right? The people who define what work is are the people who own the means of production. Right? We don't get to choose what is or is not produced. We don't get to choose that. That's not something that we're choosing. It's the capitalists that do it. And why are they choosing it? They choose the things that they produce based on an idea of the profit motive. So basically, they turn into drug dealers, right? They're constantly just trying to hijack our consciousnesses and our physiology in order to get us addicted to things, right? So that we'll constantly be coming back to them. Like, why do you think there's so many free-to-play games? Like, the first hit's free, right? They want you hooked. They want you addicted. They want you to feel like you got to come back, and then you got to pay for more, right? And that's not even mentioning, like, the fact that they own the food, right? The fact that you have to pay them for food, that you're not given a little parcel of land. You're not allowed to participate in that system. They own the land, right? And they're going to produce the food, and they're going to make sure that you don't have access to it unless you work for them. Isaac writes, AI is going to make things cheap, but there won't be anyone to buy anything. Yeah. It doesn't matter how cheap they make it. We won't have any money. Like, with what money are we going to buy this stuff? And, like, don't even get me started about, like, the planned obsolescence and the fact that they just make things to break constantly. Like, I've been finding that everything I interact with now, whenever I buy a new thing, right, my first instinct now is to expect it not to work and to expect it to break, right? And they literally will update iPhones with new software to purposefully make it slower, specifically so that people will buy the next generation of iPhone. Like, that's the kind of shit these psychos are doing with their brain damaged brains. Like, they're not actually thinking, how do we make a product that's going to last for a long time? How do we make it so that this is the last thing somebody will buy of this? Like, how do we make a computer that is completely interchangeable, completely repairable, completely eternally fixable, so that you just need to pull out one panel and put in another panel? How do we do that? They're not interested in that. They want you to throw the whole box out and buy a whole new box. That's what consoles are. Like, they're not interested in you being able to, like, oh, my computer's not working, it's this panel, and in fact it's not even the whole panel, it's just this part of the panel, and to have a guy go, oh, I could just go and fix it. They're completely disinterested in this, right? Because that's not profitable, right? The profit motive is just strangling us, and this isn't even mentioning, like, the things that could be made or the thoughts that could be pursued with if we all just sat down and said to each other, wouldn't it be cool if we all just had this and it just existed, right? Like, here's a thought. Just here's an idea, right? Imagine if we all just chipped in a little bit of money. It wouldn't be a lot. And we all just collectively funded like a FIFA open source video game that was just always there, right? That instead of everybody buying a console, everybody buying like a thing, or having to constantly buy new games over and over again, we just literally had it, and it was just in the cloud, and we could all just connect to it. And it was just routinely updated, and that's something that we all just had, and it just was there. No? Oh, there's no money in it. Right, my bad. Oh, I swear to God, Milo, if you scratch on the door and say you have to go have a poo, I'm going to be so mad at you. I'm going to be so mad if my dog scratches on the door right now. I took him down like 5 times. So I was like, got a poo? You got a poo? Are we pooing? So if he scratches on the door right now, I'm just going to be really like, come on, bro. Like, what are we doing here? Yeah. Eggs D writes, we don't need the threat of starvation and impoverishment to make us be creative. Well, and I would argue that that's actually the death of creativity. Like, the death of creativity is people doing stuff because they have to. Right? Like, so instead of actually like producing something that's genuine or real, you're producing something so that you can sell it. Right? So it's always going to have like this flattering component. It's always going to have this sort of component of like simperingness, because you're always trying to sell it to a capitalist. Like, how do you make something that's going to be good for a rich person? And that certainly just eliminates the idea of being critical of the system of capital. Like, you definitely can't be critical of the system of capital. You definitely can't produce art that's actually like saying something that's like, hey, the system of capital is actually negative. Because guess who's never going to buy that? Capitalists. They're never going to buy that. Content right. That is weird. Mario is as big as Mickey. Yeah, Mario's huge, dude. Mario's huge. Huge. Yeah. Yeah, people are too tired to have sex because they have got 3 jobs. Yeah. First billionaire Howard Hughes knew he went nuts, so he stayed out of sight his last 22 years. Yeah, I mean, that's traditionally what billionaires have done, right? That they make their wealth and then they stay quiet. They stay out of the spotlight. If you want an absolute masterclass in the billionaire that I think is like doing it absolutely pristinely and has a huge amount of awareness on this particular issue, you want to take a look at the Thompson family, specifically David Thompson. I think David Thompson is managing and maneuvering his wealth in a way that is very, very, very intelligent. He stays out of the media spotlight. The only time you can find quotes of this guy saying anything to anyone, it's always very pro-worker and very anti-capitalist. His money is monarchy money. Like, he didn't make his money from an apartheid. He didn't make his money from big industrialists or anything. Like, his dad was a baron, and his dad was a baron, and so now he's a baron, just in Canada as a baron. And the way that he maintains his wealth is simply by owning 5% of everything. So he doesn't like own Tesla. Like, he doesn't have this big like staking claim on something. He just owns 5% of the whole economy. And so as long as the whole economy goes up, so too does his wealth. And he's done very intelligent and brilliant things recently where he actually split his wealth up amongst his family so that he would stop showing at the top of these lists, and so that he would stop showing at the top of lists. Because now there's another Canadian, some fellow who's like of Chinese descent who ran some kind of Bitcoin scan scam and was found guilty of money laundering or whatever, but he's still the richest Canadian. It's just like, I forget his name offhand. But if it wasn't for David Thompson spreading his wealth amongst his entire family, so that instead of him being number one, it's actually him. He's like number 4, and then his family is like 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So they like hold those brackets, but they're not number 1. So they don't show up on the lists so often anymore. Like, that's brilliant. Like, that guy's actually doing it right. What Elon Musk is doing, this guy's a fucking idiot and a clown. Like, he's making everybody look stupid as shit. Like, the moment you step outside of America and you look at America and see what's going on and you see this Elon Musk guy, you're like, oh, they're morons. Like, they couldn't be stupider. Guy drank the Kool-Aid, yeah. No, man, like, and we've all been there. Like, that's the thing. Like, we've all been there. Like, some people grow up and some people don't. And it's just simple as that. And, like, people want to believe that their society is good. They want to believe that. And they don't want to hear criticisms of it. And then when you get people who are, like, I think about myself when I was a fundamentalist Christian. Like, I was this fundamentalist Christian, and I was walking around having these conversations with atheists and agnostics and other people. And, like, I thought I was right. Right? And, like, these people think they're right. And they're going to continue thinking they're right, even as their whole shit burns down. Even as their town is just leveled. They're just going to still say they're right. And we're actually better off under capitalism. Communism would be worse somehow. Kewell writes, USSR socialism was much more efficient than capitalism in Africa, Latin America, etc. Yeah, I mean, look, it's routine. It doesn't matter where you go. Literacy rates skyrocket. Technology development skyrockets. Like, the people who kicked off the space race were the Soviets, right? And the Americans responded because they were threatened by it. So higher levels of technological development, higher levels of education, higher levels of literacy, higher levels of life satisfaction. People are able to access resources easier. Like, when people say that communism doesn't work, all you're saying is that you don't know anything about communism. Straight up, and it's naked. Like, it's as naked as possible. Like, and all this guy, Gavin, all this guy has been doing the whole time is basically just been taking CIA talking points and handing them to me. It's like literally just, well, the CIA told me this, and I don't know anything about the subject, but I believe this implicitly. Like, it's a religious doctrine, right? Yeah, the job creators, exactly, yeah. Yeah, lots of BS jobs out there. Peanut Butter Beatrice says that's an amazing book. Yeah, Bullshit Jobs. It's a really good book, and it's small. It's really easy. Like, you'll finish it in an afternoon for sure. More like an essay. Gavin writes, going back to capitalism on that point doesn't matter because I'm talking about how socialism leads to generalized starvation and efficiency. There's just no evidence of it. Like, you just keep saying it, but there's just literally no evidence. Like, you're manufacturing a belief system that does not adhere to reality. And like, everyone has an anecdote. But like, and then you continue, you make everything cheap, great, the salary is $100. Just like, literally no evidence of this. You're just making it up. It's just invented. And the moment you actually turn and look at what was actually going on and what was actually happening, you can see pretty clearly that this is a ridiculous notion. That, like, sure, you had people who were, like, more lackadaisical and going about their lives a little bit easier. And that, sure, that made the service economy, like, a little bit slower. Sure, but you know what else it did? Made everybody a lot happier. Right? Made everything a lot easier. Made it so you didn't have these ridiculous time pressures and that a person could just completely, like, lay you off. Hey, you know that like, you're talking about, oh, your salary is only $100. Every single worker under capitalism can have the rug pulled out right from under them immediately. Literally $0 is worse than 100. Okay, Milo, you're driving me fucking crazy, dude. You're not getting any more treats, my man. Come on. You're not getting any more treats, my man. Just sitting there whining for nothing. Come chill out, dude. Come chill out. You're a good boy. Yeah, like any good religion, they just recite the mantra, right? If you say a lie long enough and loud enough, it becomes the truth. And it's just that simple. The moment you look at the Soviet Union, the moment you look at China, the moment you actually include in your analysis reality, the whole thing falls to pieces. The whole thing falls apart. It's not any different than these hyper far right conservatives, fucking Nazis, walking around in my society saying that, oh, homeless people just need to get jobs. They just need to get jobs. That'll solve everything if all these homeless people just went and got a job. Well, who's offering the jobs? Who are the job creators? Why don't they just create all these jobs that we're supposed to have? Paul writes, Apple got sued for that. I'm sure they did, but you know, they've got hundreds of billions of dollars and you've got what? Cowell writes, planned obsolescence is also absolute proof that competition is bullshit. Yeah. Isaac writes, John, when I was young, my grandfather had a fridge that was more than 30 years old and working. Yeah, that's the way it should be. Create something that works and lasts. Christopher writes, thank God for game modders, keeping old games fresh with updated rosters, jerseys, etc. Dude, and sometimes game modders are crazy, dude. Like, this is how you know the profit motive is complete bullshit. It is game modding people. Like, these people are just doing this. They're not getting paid for it. They're just doing it, right? My favorite mod that I've ever run into is for the game Sid Meier's Colonization, which allows you to colonize the New World as a European settler. That's what the game's about. And someone came along and made a mod for this called We the People, and it literally like reskins the entire map. It introduces like probably like 100 new resources. There's all these resource chains and all this resource connection, and all the buildings are new. Like, everything's new. It's a completely new game. It's just the theme that's the same, right? You're still colonizing the New World, but everything's like different and more complex and more in depth. And also they include, oh yeah, we got to talk about this. Gavin writes, most people don't care about the public bathrooms, public schools, hospitals. They're synonyms of waiting, long lines, inefficiency, and just public became a synonym of staple lower. Like, bro, like, bro, like, really, man. Like, I now I can say it pretty much nakedly. You're fucking clueless, dude. Like, this is just stupid. Like, it's just stupid. Like, but you don't know anything about socialism. I'm just gonna move on from you, dude. Like, you've convinced me you're too stupid to talk to. So please stop talking in the chat. Feel free to ask questions, but you're too stupid to talk to. You understand? And I think you actually do need to hear this, right? Because there is such a thing as a person who's so stupid that they don't realize how stupid they are. You are too stupid to talk to. You're following a religious ideology that is obviously wrong. It's like phrenology, right? It's like you're in here trying to convince me that phrenology is real. Okay? And I'm going to tell you, you are too stupid to have the opinions you have. You are not an expert. You are not an authority. You are illiterate and you don't know what you're talking about. So stop posting in my chat. Feel free to ask questions because you obviously don't know what you're talking about. And that's it. That's the end of your warning. Next post, you're gone. Unless it's a question. Feel free to ask a question. Yeah, Catwell writes, there's a communist city in China named Nanji, and people are fleeing capitalism to go there. All companies are owned by the city, no homelessness. The jobs are protected. I mean, China generally, right? Like, just China generally. You can just look at China and just be like, oh, yeah, like, obviously having an institution that is controlled by a communist party makes your society better. It's just really obvious. Like, we could solve homelessness. It would take like a month. It would take like no time at all. And you'd have like a small group of brain damaged psychopaths crying about it, like children, right? Like 2-year-olds would cry if you took away the third cookie that they were intending on eating, right? While somebody else hasn't had a cookie yet. It's the same idea. It's the same thought. And so take these houses away from these people. When they cry, go, oh, I'm sorry you don't get a fifth house for nothing. Mo. And put homeless people in it. But John, won't that collapse the economy? Yeah, yep, absolutely. I hope it does. I hope it craters their economy. And I hope people lose a lot of money. Like, I hope that these psychopathic brain damaged billionaires lose a ton of money. Right? Like, I hope they cry about it. I hope I read articles about it where I'm like, yep. Oh, no, he made me lose money. Yep, good, great. My intention is to make you lose all your money, actually, in fact. So. Yeah, Joe writes, by design to the capitalist benefit, public wasn't always a synonym of bad. Stop repeating the nonsense you heard elsewhere. Yeah. Like, this is a very serious phenomenon that we're just seeing over and over and over again. We just saw it in the chat again, right? It happens almost every single cast I do, right? Where someone comes in who is illiterate, who doesn't understand the subject, who is obviously just full of brain rot, but they speak as though they are authoritative and they actually understand the subject. Like, that's the part that gets me. That's the part that kills me. Is these people who are illiterate and clueless speaking as though they know something about a subject they know nothing about. Like, that's what's shocking. Is this confidence, this unearned bluster that comes from nowhere and has absolutely, and is rooted in nothing. And like, the moment you pull threads on their claims, it falls apart instantaneously. Like, I'm to the point now where I can literally source the CIA to dismantle some of this nonsense. And for this Gavin guy, it's like, when this guy starts talking about how people ignore their hospitals and infrastructure, while capitalism is literally in decay right now in front of your face. Like, that's the part that kills me, right? Capitalism is in decay right now, directly in front of your face. You have to try to ignore it. You have to try not to see it. Where every accusation is just a confession. Oh, under socialism, people stop paying attention to hospitals. What the fuck do you think is happening in America right fucking now? They're shutting hospitals down. What are you talking about? It's this inversion of reality. It's this inversion of the truth. Where everything you believe to be true is actually just a fucking lie. And when you actually start to pull on the thread of like, why do I believe these lies? Why am I so insistent that these lies must be true? You basically just boil down to straight up nationalism and white supremacy almost every single time. It's just crazy. No, like a walking Dunning-Kruger effect. And like, it really comes, it always circles back to me. Like it's that John Cleese quote, right? Over and over again. I just run into it again and again. It's this quote of like, the trouble with very stupid people is that how could they possibly know how stupid they are? You need to have some kind of relative intelligence to understand how stupid you are. And no one is stupider than a person who thinks they know something about a subject that they are illiterate about. It's the Dunning-Kruger effect, that people who know nothing about a subject heavily overestimate their ability to engage in that subject. And the moment they step into the field with somebody who actually knows what they're talking about, hi, hello, they look really foolish. And it just happens so often that I have to comment on it. Like, why? How is this something that's making it into the public sphere? Like, this is something that should be out of children by the time they're 12, right? That we should definitely be sitting kids down and be like, okay, cool. It is okay to admit that you don't know something about something. It doesn't make you weaker. In fact, that's the best position to hold. You should absolutely not be talking about a subject if you don't know anything about it. And you should have the wherewithal and the self-awareness to be able to acknowledge, oh, yeah, I don't actually know anything about this subject. I've never read a book on the subject. I've never looked at the data. I've never actually listened to any speeches given by any of these people. I actually have never looked into this. It's always just slogans that have been given to me by the TV screen or by other drunks in the bar that I'm in. And that's it. That's the depth of your knowledge. And then to come in here and swing your dick around, saying the most obtuse bullshit you've ever heard in your life. It's just embarrassing. Like, no wonder the society is in the decline it's in. No wonder we're in this decline. Like, Jesus fucking Christ. Cowell writes, communism works perfectly well. When it doesn't, it's because it's betrayed. Well, or just destroyed, right? Like, this is the big lie to this statement that communism doesn't work. It's like, okay, well, if communism doesn't work, then why do capitalists spend trillions of dollars destroying it? Right? That's the big lie. Like, that's the puncture of, like, capitalists are constantly saying it's about efficiency. It's you want to cut wasteful spending. The private sector knows how to cut wasteful spending. Well, then why are they spending trillions of dollars destroying communists? If it doesn't work. If it doesn't work, just let it not work. Right? Oh, communism collapses every time it's been tried. Okay, cool, then just let it. Why are we spending all this money? Why are we cooing governments? Why are we installing our own people? Why are we overthrowing people? Why are we launching big wars? Why do we do the Vietnam War? Why are we staunching the spread of communism? Why are we doing McCarthyism? Why are we spending any amount of money on a system that just doesn't work? It fails. Right? It doesn't work. You can see it doesn't work. Why don't we teach big, gigantic, long lectures about how it actually failed? Why don't we inform our citizens about what actually happened in these places? This happened, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened, and so the whole thing didn't work. There it is, and now you know. Right? Instead of that, you're given slogans. And that's supposed to be intellectual. I'm supposed to buy into that. That your slogan defeats my knowledge. Tough fucking shit. Like, tough shit. At the highest possible level, tough shit. And like, so if it fails, let it fail. Stop spending money on it. Right? No, the reason why capitalists spend all the money on that is because it's a good investment. It's a good idea to destroy it's a good idea to destroy models that are going to replace yours. Right? If you are capitalists and you see a superior model and you see people building superior models that are more efficient, that are more beneficial, and that exclude you from the process, then you need to destroy those, right? You need to destroy that. It's just very straightforward. And so for them, it's an investment. It's the reason why they do it, because they can't have a superior model in the world. But it's going to happen anyway. It's going to happen anyway because the capitalists are A, too stupid, and B, not actually as powerful as they think they are. And we're looking at a real, like, hubris moment right now. Like, it's crazy the degree to which China is going to take this place over. Like, it's actually crazy. Like, in 10 years' time, the landscape of the world is going to look so dramatically different in 10 years' time. In 10 years' time, people walking around saying communism doesn't work are going to look like lunatics. Like just deranged, foaming at the mouth, brain damaged psychos. We're literally just going to be able to point at China and just be like, and then we might get that person who's like, that's actually because of capitalism. And then we'll just point at the Economist being like crying about how bad, like point at all of the journals, pointing at calling China like neo-Marxist, point at Xi Jinping literally quoting Marx and saying everybody should read Marx. Like it's just getting embarrassing at this point. It just makes sense that the only people who are left actually defending the system of capital are just brain rotted to the highest possible degree. Literal, just magical thinking at this point. Just 1 + 1 = potato. Like, I got to circle back around to Shapiro, right? Like, this is a guy who genuinely thinks that we should follow the advice of a magic book. Straight up, that's his thinking. I have a magical book that was written by magic. And that's the reason why it's important. And this is a person we're taking seriously. Okay, cool. Yeah, XD. Yeah, cuts public funding and neglect public infrastructure. See, public doesn't work. And then they privatize it, right? Like, it's so obvious that this is what's happening that it's embarrassing. Like, it's a playbook. It's literally how to destroy the public sector 101. Get conservatives elected, conservatives defund public goods. The public good stops producing as efficiently and as well. Why? Because it's been defunded. So you're strangling it. Then claim it's because it's a public good and it should be privatized, and then privatize it. It's the playbook. And it's so obvious that that's the strategy. Like, it's just childishly obvious at this point. No, it's because socialism is inferior. It has nothing to do with the fact that we bomb them and coup them and strangle them and sanction them. That has nothing to do with anything. Duh. Fiddleford writes, I'm not an authority on the subject. I know enough, however, to be miffed when people speaking nonsense about a subject. People who are obviously oblivious, acting confident on a subject. Yeah, it's just embarrassing. Joe writes, this is a lot of people. We're just dealing with the one here. Well, it's every single day. Like, it's every single time. Like, there's always one person that comes in and talks this way, as if they know something when they're obviously stupid. Like, socialists abandon hospitals. Well, off to see my doctor. Yeah, right. Yeah, we're just dealing with one here. Elon Musk is a huge Dunning-Kruger damaged. Yeah. Where is this awful article from? The U.S. economy depends more on than ever on rich people. Like, it's the Wall Street Journal trying to frame, like, oh, the economy actually relies on rich people now, and not saying rich people stole all the money. Like, rich people obviously stole all the money. Like, this is sort of the disgusting propaganda that's in the society now, right? And I have the actual article here. I might read it just for a laugh. Yeah. The U.S. economy depends more than ever on rich people. Like, no, the headline is rich people steal money from poor people at a rate never before seen. Methane, good to see you, Methane. I feel like I haven't seen you here in a while, bud. Good to see you. This is literally how the leaders in our world act. That's what they do. Those are our role models, grifters. Yeah, there's no role models anymore. Like, if I could go back in time and tell my younger self, like, I'd love to go back to when I was 25. And what I would say to myself when I was 25 is, don't listen to anyone. Everyone is grifting you. It's all just for profit and money. Like, they're just selling you a product. That's it. And sometimes the product is you. Isaac writes, John, Cuba developed 3 vaccines against COVID-19 under enormous sanction pressure and has more doctors than Canada. I know, dude, this fact is just unbelievable, dude. Cuba has more doctors than Canada. Not per capita. Doctors. Period. That should be a national embarrassment. We should be looking at that going, oh, fuck. That's embarrassing. That a small island nation that has been getting strangled under US sanctions for decades has more doctors than we do. Full stop. Like, that's a failure. That's a massive, enormous, just colossal failure. Yeah, Fiddleford, I need these doctors in our communities in Northern Ontario for sure. And I mean, like, it should really be simple, right? Like, you train a doctor and you say, as part of your training, like, here's what it should look like, right? If we weren't fucking morons, if we weren't being led by these just insipid, vapid, brain damaged idiots. Oh, I would like to be a doctor. Oh, okay, cool. Well, come join the medical community. We're going to make sure that you're competent, some tests and all that. Oh, do I have to pay? So we're going to make sure that you're competent. And at the end of the training, if we, the medical community, are convinced that you are a decent doctor, we are going to send you to the north for a few years so you can do a term there, and then we'll cut you loose. Cool. Again, though, do I need to pay anything? Oh, man, fucking, no, come on. Like, why are we putting people in debt to become a doctor? Okay, Giant says lots of quotes on here with no proof. Maybe ask a question, my man. Like, just making these kinds of statements just makes you look stupid. Like, maybe ask a question. And try to make it something that's not, like, explicitly something the CIA says. The idea that there is a finite amount of wealth is absurdity. Okay, you're just too stupid to talk to then. Cool, I'm just gonna move on. Like, there's only so much water, right? There's only so much land. There's only so much iron or cobalt, right? Like, the earth has finite resources. There's only so much air, right? The idea that you can have infinite growth on a finite system, like, that's just brain rot, dude. It's just brain rot at the highest possible order. Okay, Giant writes, wealth can be created from nothing. Here we go, money worship. Define wealth. So in your mind, money is wealth, right? Define wealth. What's wealth? It's just the money worship, right? Like, it's this mania. It's this religious ideology, right? Pillar 1, money worship, and here it is. Oh, so wealth can be created from nothing. Define wealth. What's wealth? Like, you're the smart one, right? You're the one that wants to teach me, even though you're clearly illiterate, but that's fine. What's wealth? Cotton Wright, if communism was not working, it would have been the same supporters as actual feudalists today. No one sweats the return of old school feudalism. But socialism? Landlords still have nightmares. Yeah, good. I hope so. Isaac writes, the U.S. spends millions of dollars patrolling the Caribbean Sea around Cuba, making sure nothing comes in or goes out to the detriment of their people on the streets. Yeah. And that's an investment, right? Because if you actually allowed communism to actually flourish in Cuba, right? If you actually stopped strangling it, then people would be able to point at it and be like, Cuba's doing super good, dude. Like, the life expectancy is going up. Everybody's wealth is going up. Like, when I was in Cuba, my biggest takeaway, I have two big takeaways of my time in Cuba, and I'd love to go back to Cuba. Because when I went there the first time, I was stuck on the resort, and I kind of just was in the resort mainly. I'd love to spend a lot more time in the city proper. Like, people will just hand you the Communist Manifesto. That's big takeaway number one. You'll literally just be walking around and people will be like, here, and they'll just give you the Communist Manifesto. So the idea that they're like under duress, the idea that the citizens there are like somehow in a dictatorship and they're forced and plagued by it's silly. Like, they're giving you the Communist Manifesto. And then the second thing that I really took away is that if these guys just had access to power tools, like, and they could trade for those, it'd be so easy. Like, there's plantations and factories that are not being used because they would just overproduce and then they would just sit there and they would not be able to attach to anything. So they just don't utilize their productive capacity to its fullest because they don't have a market, because they're being strangled by the Americans. So if you just opened up your market, if you open them up to the market, they would kick up the factories, right? They kick up the plantations, sugar, tobacco, cigars, rum, and they would be able to connect into the global market, and they should trade for power tools. I was watching people do cool things, being very productive with hand tools, because that's what they had, right? And they were doing things that was like, yeah, it'll take me like all day, it'll take me a week in order to do this. And like, me and my dad were looking at this and we're just like, yeah, like, if they just had a Dremel, done in 5 minutes. If there was one guy in Cuba with a set of power tools and he was just walking around doing shit, he could do so much. You just do so much. And they can't have that, right? They can't have like this communist island being successful doing communism right off the coast of Florida. They just can't have it. Did this guy ever actually define wealth? For example, putting resources into land, the resources gained are more than was put into it. Common sense. So land is wealth. And the resources that are produced from that land is wealth. And that's infinite. Right? Is that correct? And then you say, communists like yourself don't understand human nature. You dismiss me as fucking stupid. You won't engage. Here I am engaging right now, but you are very stupid. Like, and you should know it. Right? And right now you're on the precipice of being too stupid to talk to. Okay. And I'm going to show you, like, why you're stupid. It's very obvious that you're a very stupid person. You think land and the resources that the land produces is wealth. Great. So that's definitely finite. There's only so much land, and there's only so many resources the land can produce. And that's just 101. Like, that's just extremely obvious. The land can only produce so much. So we're done, right? Your base claim is false, and it's obviously false. So we're just going to move on. Generation Y Me, good to see you. Garden State, Cuba exports more doctors than any country too, I believe. Yeah. Generation Y Me writes, there's some good compensation programs for doctors to go north, but the doctors need good infrastructure there to stay. Yeah, same with nurses. Yeah. Generation Whammy. Is this a TikToker? It's always a TikToker. Yeah, more isn't infinite. Like, your claim is infinite. You understand? That's your claim. You are the one that made the claim to infinite growth and infinite wealth, which is so stupid, and it's ridiculous that you're doubling down on it. That's why you're stupid, right? And making these kinds of very stupid claims means that I don't listen to anything else you have to say, right? Like, if you're getting this wrong, like if you're stupid on this point, that is like obvious. There is only so much land. That land can only produce so many resources. That is the very definition of finite. Obviously. Obviously. Then you discredit yourself as an intellectual thinker, and I'm no longer going to listen to you. You're too stupid to talk to. Cheers. Now you're just cluttering my chat, so goodbye. Just like doubling down on being a stupid person. It's unbelievable to see. You can have infinite growth in a system that is, by its very definition, finite. Infinite growth is completely possible with finite resources. You just don't understand economics. Just fucking idiots. Just so fucking stupid, dude. Like, so fucking, and it's the confidence. Again, it's just the confidence. It's this blistering confidence these morons have, where they actually think that the things that they're saying are intelligent. It's just unbelievable to see. Yeah, XD's nailing it, man. No, just pop into creative mode and spawn shit. Skill issue. Yeah, maybe go out and touch some grass. Canadian snow leopard. Good to see you, my man. Yeah, go try to build a house on land you don't own. The cops will be there within a week. Oh yeah, we didn't even need to get into like the structure of capitalism and like the withholding of resources and how like labor is actually like how you should value things and all that. We didn't need to get into any of that. Like we were literally stopped at infinite growth with finite resources. Like if you're not grabbing hold of that concept, if you're not grabbing hold of the concept that like you literally cannot have infinite growth in a closed ecosystem with finite resources, like if you're not grabbing hold of that, then there's no point moving forward. Like 1 + 1 in fact does equal 2. We don't need to get into like more complex ideas like the labor theory of value or any of that kind of stuff. Like we don't need to bother. And just like, it's always the stupidest people that are the most confident. It's like when you're playing a video game, like the person who is the worst is the person who's chirping the most. It's always the case. Hull writes, surrounded by omniomaniac individuals. Omniomaniac correlates with narcissism too. I have no idea what that word is that you're saying. Hold on. See, here's what people should do when they're confronted with something they don't know anything about. I don't know what that word is. Omniomania. Shopping addiction. Compulsive buying disorder. Characterized by a sexual shopping buying behavior that causes adverse consequences. Oh, yeah. Yeah. For sure, dude. I know for myself, like, I wouldn't call it what I do a disorder, but I think most people do this. Like, most of the time, the things that are called disorders are, like, behavior that most people engage in. It's just they find a couple of cases where a person is really fucking doing it, you know? And like, I know for myself, I'll definitely like be feeling bad, be feeling like, meh, I don't know, everything's kind of blah. And then I'll just like buy something, and it's like something I'll never use. Like I'll buy a video game, and it's like I'll never play it, or I'll play it once and then be like, meh, and I'll just like never go back to it. And it's just completely like to fill a void. It's totally to just fill this like emptiness, this like feeling of like, and to have this kind of sense of like, no, I'm doing okay. I can buy things. Look, I'm defining myself by consumerist purchases. Yes, I feel like I'm a real person that exists in the world now. For sure. For sure. Generation Y Me says, even compensation packages for doctors to go to rural places. Huntsville, I think, was offering. I gotta think that that's like 80,000 for 5 years. It's not $80 for 5 years, right? On top of what doctors will get going to a rural area, and that's Huntsville, hardly north. Like, yeah, but we're living in a for-profit system, right? Like, the actual capitalist solution actually is just to let those people die. Like that's the actual capitalist solution. Like the capitalist solution is not send a doctor up there with higher compensation package, make sure that these people get good care. That's not the capitalist solution. The capitalist solution is just to let those people die. And that's the capitalist solution. Fiddleford writes, on the radio where I live, locals have said Jesus is the only doctor here. Oh, man, dude. That's truly unfortunate. Jesus. We don't need here in the city of Countersburg. We don't need a doctor because we have the ever loving embrace of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. And so, if you could find it in your heart to open up your wallet and pull out a dollar bill for Jesus Christ, be sure to send it to the address you see below. Good opportunity to say like, share, subscribe. Hit those bells, hit the whistles. If you find it in your heart, if you think to yourself, today is the day that I want to support communism, be sure to reach deep down into your wallet and donate to the address you see below. God bless each and every one of you. Jeez Louise, dude. Fiddleford writes, in similar communities, different province, the government has blocked Cuban doctors from entering negotiated deals between the community and Cuba. Yeah, like Cuba's getting isolated. Like it's one of the things that's happening to Cuba. There's two things that are happening to Cuba that I'll be fascinated to see. I guess technically it's three. The Castros are finally going to be out of power. Well, thank you, Generation Y Me. Generation Y Me with a $5 donation. Showing that the grift works. The grift works. If you just put on the Jesus voice and say, be sure to donate to your local communist. It works. Haha. You're only making me stronger, Generation Y Me. Thank you for the donation, bud. I do appreciate it. The Castros are going to be out of power because the last Castro, I think his name is Raul Castro, is going to die, as one does. There is two forces going on in Cuba right now. Force number one, we should actually allow foreign capital into Cuba. If you take a look at how China did it, China showed us that you can bring foreign capital into your country while simultaneously making sure that foreign capital doesn't take over. So there is a movement within the Cuban government where they're saying we should do that, right? We should do that. Star Bright Knight writes, Jesus is the best. Doctor, have a look. I got my Bible right here. Like, I love Jesus too, but I don't think he was a wizard, right? Like, if you want to have a real conversation about Jesus, we can have a conversation about Jesus. But I don't think that he was a magic man. And I think that thinking that Jesus was a magic man actually disempowers what Christianity actually represented and what it actually represents to the modern day, right? So if you'd like to stick around and hear my take on Jesus, you can go right ahead with that. But if you'd like to just sort of continue wallowing, you go right ahead. And then the second thing that's the next thing that's going on in Cuba that's actually a really big deal is they're joining the BRICS organization. And that is definitely going to raise tensions between America and BRICS, right? Like, if Cuba can get goods out of Cuba and trade it into a larger international market, that's the big deal. That's the big deal, right? Like, if they can kick up some of these factories, if they can start trading with China, if they can get rum, if they can get cigars, and if they can get that into China or India or Russia, it's a game changer for them. Huge game changer. And so, and it could all just end up in disaster, right? Like, America could just go nuts and just decide, like, right now you got America threatening Canada and Mexico and the Panama Canal and Greenland and, like, doing all this shit. Like, they could just decide to pull the trigger and just go into Cuba, right? They can just do that. Star Bright Knight says, yes, please do share your thoughts. So, and let me be clear about my position is that I call myself a theist, right? I think that we live in a universe that is itself alive, and that's a universe that we have given the name God, right? Now, people have been writing about about this concept and the mystery of our reality and the mystery that we are in. You have lots of different authors writing about the mystery of reality, the mystery of the universe, the mystery of the collective experience that we're having together, the living entity that we find ourselves within, the body of God. And you have, like, brilliant theologians. Like, Isaac Newton is one of the most brilliant theologians that have ever lived. The guy that invented calculus, right? You'd never really think of it of him. Guys like Augustine and Aquinas, right? These guys are brilliant theologians. And you've got guys like Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who stood up against the Nazis and sacrificed himself, fighting for the truth and righteousness of Jesus Christ, right? But what has happened in the modern era is that an actual understanding of the texts that these writers produced is being supplanted and replaced with an interpretation, a fundamentalist interpretation that insists that magic is real. Right? Hey, Sven, how you doing? So that the stories of Christ, where he's doing magic, were real things that actually happened. And it's this insistence and this insistence towards fundamentalism that Jesus is the only thing, that this book is the only book, that is a major, massive problem. And that Christianity itself right now is just loaded with grifters, frauds, liars, con men, guys like Joel Osteen, Pat Robertson, right? Robertson. Like, these guys are grifters, and they are using the and you have like doctrines that are going on today that are obviously false, like the prosperity gospel, for example, which is very popular, is blasphemous. It's just straight up heretical. It's not in the Bible. Well, it is actually in the Bible, in the book of Job, where they disprove it, where they argue against the prosperity gospel. And and so Christianity as a force in today's modern world is almost universally a force for just the most desperate evil that exists. I think that the new atheists were right about that. That guys like Hitchens and Harris and Dawkins, while I fundamentally disagree with their conclusion towards religion on a whole, they were right about that Christian fundamentalists are evil, and it's obvious that they're evil. That they're obvious heretics, they're obvious frauds, they're obvious liars. And so Starbright says, so you're saying that the Gospels were written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and not the eyewitness accounts of those disciples? I'm not quite sure I understand your question, so I'm not going to comment on it. I will say that, like, yeah, so what you have, so Matthew, right, is and this is all by the lore, because we're not actually sure who actually writes these things, right? But by the lore, Matthew is a tax collector, one of Jesus's apostles, and he was basically writing a diary, right? And you can read Matthew; it reads like a diary. And he was very clearly, like, the Sermon on the Mount is in Matthew, right? And the Sermon on the Mount is very beautiful, a beautiful sermon that should be read and paid more attention to. And it's very clear that Matthew was there taking notes, right? And then you have Mark, which is basically just a series of campfire stories told by Peter to Mark. Right? Peter being the head of the church. So Mark is actually probably the most significant of the Gospels, although everybody loves each Gospel for their own reason, right? Then you have Luke, and Luke was a historian that goes in after the fact, right? And that Luke goes into the region and collects all of the stories that he's being told on behalf of his patron. And that's why I think a lot of people like Luke, because it seems to be the most dispassionate of the texts, right? And then you have John, which is the disciple Jesus loved. And so that one is the most human, right? And that's why each of the Gospels, I think, is interesting, because they each have these kinds of different perspective on that particular story. But I think what's fundamental to understanding the Gospels and really religious writing generally is that the magic's not real, right? Like, the stories are purposeful and they have intent. And I could be even convinced that they're based on real events that really happened, right? That things occurred. And then, but religious writers and writers generally, not just religious writers generally, like, you can see this with, like, Harry Potter and modern movies today. We use magic as a way to engage us into the abstract space, into our imaginative selves, and so that we can discuss the reality that we're within in a manner that is symbolic. And we use symbols to communicate much bigger and larger ideas so that we can understand something that's fundamentally difficult to understand, which is not just the world around us, but also ourselves. And it's this method of writing and this method of storytelling that seems ubiquitous to religious texts, right? Like, there's magic in all religious texts, right? Like, the Vedas are loaded with magic. Buddhist texts are loaded with magic. We like magic. And it's important that when you encounter a section of a religious text that has magic in it, the thing that you should be thinking is not, whoa, a wizard, right? Like, magic is real. Like, the thing that you should be thinking is, okay, there's magic. that should be a trigger for us to say, okay, there are symbols. And where do these symbols connect to other symbols? Because that's really what the New Testament is, right? Like the New Testament is written during like the peak, the height of the Roman Empire. Like I feel like this piece just gets utterly obliterated from biblical analysis, which is to me shocking. It's shocking that we lift these texts out of the Roman fucking Empire. And at the height of the Roman Empire, right after Julius Caesar is assassinated, right after Spartacus is defeated during the Third Servile Wars, and 10,000 men are crucified along the Agrippa Way, so that slaves entering the main port into Rome would see 10,000 crosses. These are enormous events that have historical meaning to the writers of the New Testament, without a doubt. And when magic occurs within the New Testament, it's very clear that they are connecting symbols to other stories that have been told, because you have all of these slaves coming into Italy. You have all of these slaves coming into Rome, from Gaul, from Egypt, from Persia, from Africa, right? The Romans went all over the place and brought slaves in from all over the fucking place. And so you have just this mishmash of slaves, of an underclass that can't communicate with one another, not only because they don't speak the same language, but because they don't have the same shared stories. And you can see within the Gospels, that that a lot of these stories that Christ do are references to Persian stories, to Grecian stories, to Egyptian stories, to African stories, all being cobbled together in this one figure of Christ, who ultimately Christ's story is that a good man who did good works on this earth and upheld the law was crucified by the state for doing so. And that even though the state crucified him, they cannot kill the message, that the message will be resurrected. That's the story of Christ. It's not a wizard died and then went to heaven, is now looking down on you, and if you just pray to him, good things will happen. It literally, the message is, the state will crucify you for upholding the truth, but the truth will live on. They can kill you. They cannot kill the message. And there's a reason why they're trying to kill that. There's a reason why they're trying to kill that interpretation of Christ. Because they don't want you to uphold the truth of Christ. They don't want you to uphold the truth of the story of Christ, which is that illegitimate systems, such as the Roman Empire or the modern American capitalist system, will die. They cannot continue on. All they can do is kill good people, but they cannot kill the message. That's the story of Christ. And these frauds and these liars and these hacks and these heretics are doing everything they can to make sure you never realize it. So you'll always fork over your money to them. You'll always give money to them while they tell you all you got to do is pray to Jesus and good things will happen. And if they don't happen, it's because you're not praying enough and you're not giving enough money. Fuck these people. Fuck these losers. How dare they? Starbright says, by way of apologies for my assumption with thinking I am dumb. I was making fun. I was knee deep in it, Starbright. So I don't blame you, because I understand. Right? What was I doing? I was, if you make sure you give $1 and Jesus Christ will put blessings upon you. I understand. I understand. You probably heard that and we're like, oh, this guy thinks I'm a fucking loser. I'll say this. This is what I'll really say. Like, and I'll be really open with you right now, right? Like, my dad is a true believer. He really believes in Jesus. He goes to school to learn more about Jesus. He has degrees and shit, right? And he's a true believer. Jesus Christ was real, and he is the way, the truth, and the life, right? And no one comes to the Father except through me, that kind of thing, right? So just like old school Baptist fundamentalist Christian. He sings country gospel music, man. Like it's and he's good. He's good. And the and what I have learned, and what I've learned about communicating with my father about Jesus, is that it's not relevant if the magic is real or not. That's not what's relevant, right? That the conversation about Jesus and about the magic and about those texts is the method by which we speak to one another about our emotional selves and how we signal to one another how we feel emotionally about things that are happening in reality. So that when my father says, you know, this really reminds me of that time that Jesus did this, instead of me going, oh, this fake wizard with his magic that didn't exist, and and going down this rabbit hole of trying to be like, but that didn't happen, and it did, that's blah blah blah. Instead of that, I say, okay, so now we're in an emotional space. Now we're in the abstract space where symbolism exists. Now we're dealing with one another emotionally now. We're not intellectual now. And Jesus gives us permission to no longer be intellectual with one another, to speak about our feelings, which in the modern era, for like the millennials and the Gen Z, there are other methods to articulate our emotional selves, we feel. But for previous generations, you did this by talking about Jesus. And that was the language. And so when my father says, this reminds me of the story of Jesus, and he tells that story, that it's much more important for me to engage with that on an emotional level and try to understand how he feels about the subject through my understanding of the story that he's telling. And the more I learn about the stories of Jesus and about those stories within the New Testament, the stronger that ability to communicate with him is. So to me, I think that leftists should be very fluent in the Bible. I think that leftists should be, even if you're an atheist. And the reason why I think that leftists should be very fluent in the Bible and understand what those stories are and understand the symbols behind them and understand all of that is so that when people who are communicating their emotional internal selves through the lens of Christ and Jesus, you can go along that journey with them. And you can learn something about them. And hopefully also bring something of yourself into that conversation, which I think is very important to do in the environment that we are currently in. People who are walking around talking about Jesus should be absolutely reminded of the Great Commandment. Love your neighbor as yourself. Love the Lord your God with all your heart. Do you think we're doing that today? Do you think Elon Musk and Donald Trump and Ben Shapiro and Matt Walsh and Steve Bannon, do you think they're loving their neighbor as themselves? Do you think that when Christ stood up and said, love your neighbor as yourself and love the Lord your God with all your heart, he thought this is what it would mean? because the Christians and the Christian fascists are taking over. They have taken over. And if we can't communicate with them, if we cede the Bible to them, if we say that's your text, well, then they're going to wield it like a sword. And they are. But I'll tell you that if one of these Christian fascists tried to wield that text as a sword at me, they're going to find out pretty fast that I'm not threatened. That when you know something about that text, it's like you're wearing armor against these guys. You want to know what we should be doing against these Christian fascists? We should be learning that text better than they learn it, because they don't actually read it. They don't actually know anything about it. That all they really know about it is the magic is real, and when I die, I get to go live with Jesus in heaven. And there's a rapture coming. Right? And so it's kind of configured itself like a death cult. Right? Life will be better when I'm dead. And Jesus is coming back after war and death and famine and plagues are unleashed. So let's unleash those war and death and famine and plagues. Let's do a genocide. Jesus will come back. Right? The ends justifies the means, which is exactly what I'm sure Jesus meant when he said, love your neighbor like yourself. So I don't consider myself a fundamentalist. I don't see that it's relevant to the discussion to try to discover whether Christ was real or not. I don't see it as relevant to the discussion or helpful or useful at all to try to uncover, well, was Christ actually there when he said and this, and are these claims and all? Like, the book has fucking magic in it. Like, the book has magic in it, for God's sakes. Obviously, we're talking about something else. Like, real obvious. But if you're going to stand in front of me and say that the magic is real and the magic happened, okay, boy. Like, that's fine if you want to have an emotional journey. But if you're also then going to say, oh, yeah, we should cut Social Security. Oh, boy, buddy, howdy. Oh, you don't actually give a shit about your Christ. And that's the big thing, man. We got all of these people, we got all of these Christians in the United States walking around saying how much they love Jesus, and they fucking hate this guy. They despise their Christ. It's really obvious that these guys loathe and hate Christ. And that if Christ was standing in front of them saying the things that Christ said, they'd be the ones to crucify him. Even the basics. Forget about the Sermon on the Mount. Right? Forget about the challenges to wealth. Right? Forget about all that. Just the simple statement of the Great Commandment, which is called the Great Commandment. He called it the Great Commandment. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your mind. Love your neighbor as yourself. And there wasn't a little asterisk that said, unless they're trans, unless they're gay, unless they're black, unless they're an immigrant. There wasn't a little asterisk that let you off the hook. So you got to choose. And these Christian fascists got to choose. Do they love Jesus, or do they just love the little toy they made of him? And the only way we're going to be able to put their feet to the fire on that is if we know something about the text. So read your Bible. I feel like I'm due for a read through of this book again. I've read through it twice from cover to cover. I should go for a third. It's been like a decade since I've done that. I feel like it would be really interesting now. Skip Numbers, and probably Deuteronomy too. Most of Deuteronomy. You don't need to really go too deep into like what was nomadic law? What was the law of this nomadic culture? Bound rights. New Testament treats immigrants a lot differently than the Old one. I mean, the differences between the Old Testament and the New Testament are like pretty stark, and it's pretty obvious why they are as different as they are. Like the how to say this properly? Like the Old Testament is like very nomadic. Like how to really say this really properly? The evolution of the Bible, the evolution that the Bible takes, right, follows the evolution of humanity, right? That we live, like when you're in the Old Testament, you're literally reading stories about like 20 people living in a valley, right? Nomads. Like human sacrifice is a thing that exists. This is why I really, really hate it when atheist types go after the story of Isaac and how God commanded him to sacrifice his child. And then right when he was going to do it, God told him, no, you don't have to. Everything's totally cool, right? From like this literalist interpretation, from this like fundamentalist interpretation, it seems crazy, right? It's a crazy story. Guy standing there, God tells him to kill his child. He goes to do so. God tells him not to, right? Actually, Abraham, thank you for the correction, Starbright. I appreciate that. The from a literalist interpretation, that's a crazy story. From a symbolic understanding and an emotional understanding, and from a historical understanding, it's very clearly a repudiation of child sacrifice, which is something that happened, right? That there is child sacrifice going on. And it's clearly setting up the story to do a child sacrifice, which is what's going on in reality, followed up by the ending of God saying, you don't need to do this anymore. No more child sacrifice. And so you can see a culture shift happen through the story. You can see people going, I don't know about this child sacrifice thing, boy. Why are we doing this? And instead of sitting down and being like, we have all these rational reasons for what, because guess what? That's not what humans are. As much as we want to believe it, humans are not intellectual creatures first. We can get to that. We can become that. We can achieve that. We can reach that. But we're not that first. We're highly emotional, highly reactive, highly tribal creatures first. And so we're not going to sit down and be like, well, the benefits pro-con, what's like, no. I'm sacrificing my child for a good wheat field this year. We need crops this year. People are starving. I'm going to sacrifice my child. And that'll show God that I'm serious. Well, along comes this story and it goes, yeah, you don't need to do that. Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. Everybody thinks it. So God told us that we're not doing that. And everybody agrees with that? Everyone goes, yeah, yeah, yeah. There you go. Culture shift. And the Bible is loaded with this. The Bible is loaded with these stories of culture shift. Culture shift. But you have to respect who these people are. Like they're nomadic wandering people. Like they're literally like, it's like we've got these texts being written by people who are straight up going from monkeys to people. Like we're straight up watching that happen, and how this tribe of roving, wandering, like barbarians and apes essentially grapples with what it is to have a community and an idea of culture, an idea of how do we live together and what do we do. And they wrote it down, and now we have it, and we look at it now and we go, oh fuck yeah, we're not, like, some of us are saying we should do this shit again, right? Which shows you that we can regress back to monkey, we can regress back to the ape, we can become that again, we can become all that again. But that text exists not to say follow this, which is stupid. It exists for us to go, that's where we came from. That's where we came from. And we can get back there again if we want. But the whole point of this thing being written is that it was a better iteration of what came before it. And that we need to continue forward. And that translates into the New Testament. That ultimately translates into the New Testament. That initially the author's perception of God is harsh and brutal, sadistic. Like one of my favorite stories in the Bible is the Book of Job, and that the Book of Job is about God and the devil make a bet that Job, who is a righteous man who believes in God, will turn his ways, and that he only believes what he believes because he has a good life. And so the devil says, let me ruin his life, and then he'll curse your name. He'll curse you. And God says, okay, I'll take that bet. And so the devil goes down, kills his family, destroys all his wealth, makes it so his fields can't produce, and inflicts him with boils. And the text is very specific, even on the soles of his feet. Just brutal. No relief from this. That's who God is. A guy that's going to take a bet and ruin your life to prove to the devil something. And then there's his friends show up and there's big conversations, right? And the biggest one in my view is you must have done something wrong, Job. You must deserve this. And Job being like, I didn't do shit, right? Shit happens. God's going to do what God's going to do. Like, I just live, I'm just here. I didn't do anything. I don't deserve this. A straight up repudiation of the prosperity gospel as it stands today. And then you get to the end of the text, and then the devil is sated, and so he fucks off. And then Job and God have a conversation with one another. And Job essentially says, hey, this sucked, dude. This sucked a lot. I hated the shit out of that. And God's response is, who cares what you think? You're a little tiny, insignificant, tiny little bug. I could smash you. I could just squish you. Right? Were you there when the earth was created? And it expounds on it. It's like a big, long thing about how, like, God is like this all-powerful force. And Job is essentially a meaningless, pathetic nothing. Get fucked, Job. That's God's response to Job. And then Job goes, that is a good point. Yeah. God doesn't say sorry. God doesn't apologize. He barely seeks to make amends by setting things right for Job. The life that he had before, he basically gets back again. Right? I mean, sure, he killed his children and whatever, but fine. Right? So we're back on track with Job. You know, the life he had, okay, back again. But at no point does God say, like, yeah, it was important. I had to show something. This had meaning, right? In fact, quite explicitly at the end of the book, it's that it doesn't have meaning. That your life doesn't have meaning. I'm God. Fuck you. And that's how the book ends. And we're all just like, okay. Anything good that's happening in your life is by the grace of my indifference to you. And that's Job, right? And that sort of runs through, right? Like that sort of runs through. But you can also see texts like Psalms is a good one. Psalms is a good one. There's a lot of exaltation in Psalms. The Psalms don't really make sense to us because they're supposed to be music, like they're supposed to be song. And but it's very clear that there's like a lot of uplifting and a lot of praise, right? And the prophets are great because the prophets are basically just like, Israel, what are you doing? Bro, I feel like a lot of the prophets should be reread right now. We've got Israel committing a genocide, and I bet Micah would just be like, this shit again. You guys know what happened last time, right? Like, you understand what happened last time, right? So if you are mean to everyone around you, and if you keep acting like a bunch of dumbasses, it's only a matter of time until the people around you will come and get you. And they did. They did exactly that. There's the whole like exile to Babylon thing that happens to the Jews, right? And I'm sure Micah would just be sitting there being like, this shit again. Oy vey. And so by the time we get to the story of Christ, right, the Jews have been living in exile. Like, they had a kingdom, right? Like, that's actually true. Like, where Palestine is where Israel was. They had the kingdom of Israel with David and Solomon and all that. But after living in exile for a long time and kind of being in a diaspora, and for a long fucking time too, like not an insignificant amount of time, the view of God begins to soften. And the transition from the God that exists in Job to this different idea of what God is, who God is, begins to emerge. And there is this prevailing idea that existence itself and creation itself is an act of love. That it is better that things exist than they don't exist. And yes, there is hardship and decay and death. Yes. But all of that exists within this underpinned idea that that we are within a God that will ultimately bring us towards love. And that the arc of history and the arc of civilization and society and the evolution of humanity shows that to be true. That we start brutish and cruel and violent, and slowly and steadily over time, we get away from that and we become something different and we become something else. And that God didn't change, just our understanding of God changed and evolved. And I think the worst thing that happened to Christianity was that they grabbed the texts they liked in like the Nicene councils and they bound them between these two covers and they said, that's Christianity. That's it. And they refused to allow it to continue to evolve. and change. And it became a tool of power. Obviously, it became this like enormous problem in and of itself. But this message of God as love, right? Like anytime any atheist, especially like the hardliners, say that Christianity it's a burden, it's caused problem. The story of Christ is the cited reason by Constantine for the abolition of crucifixion. That by itself that by itself shows that there is power within the story of Christ, and there's power within the Christian tradition, certainly. That we used to crucify people. Like 10,000 people were crucified at the end of the war with Spartacus. Crucifixion you saw a crucifixion happen. Like imagine you're walking to your grocery store, and on your way to the grocery store, there is a person dying, nailed to a cross by the state, no less. That you know you cannot help. You are not permitted to aid in any way. And if they're a significant person, there'll be a soldier posted there who will tell you to move along. That's what that's your Western civilization right there. When these Nazis are talking about upholding Western civilization, that's what they're talking about. And it was the story of Christ, and it was the Christian tradition that eventually led to the abolition of crucifixion. And it's never come back. No Christian nation since its abolition has picked up the practice of crucifixion again. That's a major success. Low observable goat writes, or a black dude hanging from a tree. Yeah, that's what there's a book that I've been meaning to read, and it just keeps slipping through my fingers. I think it's called The Post and the Lynching Tree. The author of it draws a line between the practice of crucifixion and the lynching of black people in America's history, and makes the argument that these are very similar for the purpose of what they were used for. That the process of lynching someone is a way to purge the society of dissidents, maintain order through terror, right? And organizations like the Ku Klux Klan, they seek to rule through terror, for sure. And so, but this is why I think having an understanding of the story of Christ is important, so that you can say, like, hey, do you think there is a parallel between the figure of Jesus Christ and the figure of Martin Luther King? Or even Malcolm X? Do you think there is a parallel to be had there? Do you think that there is a parallel between the story of Christ and other people who the state has persecuted and gone after? Like, this is the true damage that these capitalists are trying to avoid with the story of Christ. That fundamentally, the story of Christ is about a man who was crucified by the state for upholding truth and justice. Starbright says, now I'm heading out. Was listening while I got ready to leave. Have a great day. You have a great day too, Starbright. Thank you for sending me down this path. As you can tell, I like talking about this subject. It's actually my favorite subject to talk about. I don't often get the chance, so thank you. Oh, oh, Starbright says, I have to head out now. I have an appointment to get to. I am a true believer. I would like to return and talk more sometime. If you wish me to return, let me know. Oh, yeah, come on back. Come on back, Starbright. You were very kind and very lovely this whole time. So I'm glad that we got off on the wrong foot but found our footing. Uh, there's something like wholesome and uplifting whenever I get talking about theology in this, because one of the things that and it's hard for me to remember because it's not an intellectual act. It can be intellectual, but it's hard to reason yourself into it. That's why I like to go down to the beach and I like to just be surrounded by forces that are well beyond me, because it's easier to come to this recognition and realization, which I think that all religious texts are constantly trying to prod you towards, which is that each and every one of us is an aspect of God. That if Jesus was the Son of God, then aren't I also the Son of God? And this understanding that you and I are both simultaneously living God's life, that God is exploring itself through our existences, and that God is more than willing to allow this existence to unfold in a manner that is reactive, that we are reacting to stimuli and reacting to what's going on. I think most of us spend most of our time like that. But that it is completely possible for a person to sit down and go, wait a minute, I am filled. This is the Christian language, right? I'm filled with the Spirit of Christ. I'm filled with the Spirit of God. And it's perfectly possible to walk around with that energy and that idea that you are you, but you are also God. And that God exists within you as it exists within all things and all people. And that you can walk around and look at things and see them through the eyes of your Creator. You can do that. And every time this happens to me, which, as I said, it usually happens when I get down to the beach for a good amount of time, I'm always filled with this overwhelming sense of gratitude and humility. That this world, that this existence exists and I get to be part of it. That I'm not a worm or a bug or some, like a cow caught in a fucking facility waiting to be slaughtered. I get to have this experience. This is the lot of Jonathan Sanderson. And it's pretty good. There's definitely been worse. And I try to carry that into my life, and I try to carry that into my existence, and I try to say to myself, I want to do right by my creator. I want to do right by my mother and my father and my family, but I really want to do right by my creator. Because ultimately, I think the best gift that we could give our creator, the best gift that we could give back to the force that was responsible for creating us in the first place, is to make it so that the generation after, the next iteration, the next group of the vessels of God, of the creative forces, have a better life, free from war, free from plague, free from famine, free from genocide, free from fear of starvation and poverty, free from wage slavery. That the next iteration has a better go, so that the creator can have a better time exploring itself. And that's what I am always trying to do. And sometimes I get caught in a pattern of thinking the best thing for me to do is nothing, because then at least I can't hurt anybody. At least I can't cause problems. And more I'm beginning to see, and more I'm hopefully continued to be inspired towards getting more active again, and getting out and doing things that I think would benefit the society, not from a productivity or money standpoint, but from a improving the culture and improving what we are. And I do have a gift. I have this gift of song, and I have this gift of music, and I know that I have it. And I have been going out, and I have been singing, and it has been so positive and uplifting. And I'm glad that I'm doing it. Because I know that when I sing, I can bring something. I can soothe people. I can make them cheer and make them laugh and make them cry, and allow them to express something that's hidden deep within them. And in doing so, I open up the space. I'm blessed to be able to open up the space, a crack in this reality, so that we can begin to engage in the abstraction and begin to open ourselves up more and more to the realization that we are, each and every one of us, aspects of our creator walking around interacting with itself. And that it doesn't need to be difficult. We don't need to be at odds with one another. We don't need to fight one another. We don't need to exploit one another. That things could be so good, and so lovely, and so wonderful. And it would be so wonderful if we understood that the harm we do to someone else is the harm we do to ourselves. That hurting someone else is not much different than one cell in your body attacking another cell within your body. It only damages the whole. And right now we are cancer cells. Right now we are cancerous. And I really wish we weren't. I really wish that we could just exist together. That's all. Like, I just wish that we could just exist together and just live peacefully with one another. But right now, the governing ethos seems to be that it is better to rule in hell than serve in heaven. And until that changes, until we realize that the harm we do to others is the harm we do to ourselves, that helping someone else helps yourself, that improving the lives of others is how you improve your own life. Until we get there and realize that on a fundamental level, we're just going to be this cancer cell. We're just going to be cancerous. And that seems to be like the central struggle for us. Like, there's a prevailing ideology that exists out there called libertarianism, which is the childish notion that if everybody just does what they want, everything will work itself out. When it just makes sense from just like a basic common sense perspective to say, no, we have like common experiences. There are common universal experiences. No matter how hardline individualist you are, there are experiences that you are going to have that are identical, that are the same to literally every single other person in reality. It makes sense that we create institutions to deal with that. Gavin, still around. How many socialist countries have there been until now? I mean, that sort of depends on what you mean by socialist. Like, the history of socialism and communism can be traced to recent history, right? Karl Marx, sort of the father of all these ideas, him and Engels. And like, so you can certainly, like, the Soviet Union made a stab at it. China is currently having a pretty good run. Vietnam, Cuba, places like Nepal. Is Nepal the place where there's like 13 parties and most of them are communist? It's like a multi-party system. But then, of course, other people might be convinced into believing that places like Denmark, Sweden, the Netherlands, that these places are also socialist. I think that Stalin was right when he said that social democracy is objectively the left wing of fascism. But I'd say that those are probably the big ones. Like, that's the major one. Like, obviously, like, there's also like Cambodia. I feel like there's one that I'm just completely blanking on. But like, most of the Middle East actually had like fairly strong. Well, yeah, like Afghanistan for a moment had a communist leadership. Like, there's most of the Middle East has also had like a history with communism as well. That's not really well known. Not like, I don't even really know it that well. Like, it's very Eurocentric, my worldview, of course, because that's my upbringing. Although I think that my recent understanding of China has been really very enlightening, very enlightening. So yeah, there's been like a healthy amount. And of course, like these are all first experiments uh, uh, in a process that's going to take like centuries to unfold, right? Isaac writes, John, you can find the ideals of socialism in the Bible. Yeah, I mean, like it, the first Christians were communists, like pretty clearly. It's like explicitly stated in Acts that they all got together, they had compounds, that they shared everything they had. Like it's pretty straightforward, and that in many ways, I think it can be argued that the original um, the like the transition towards feudalism away from the empire of slavery is a transition to a more communal and more communist, if you like, form of lifestyle. That the like the feudal serfs lived in like a community and a commune in many ways. That it's not until you get the rising up of lords and knights and all this kind of stuff, and that whole the monarchy comes out of it, that feudalism warps itself. Uh, Roy says, from what I count, yeah, and then he makes a list. So at least 10 countries tried communism. So I think you need to get away from this idea of tried communism, right? That like communist leaders and communist people come in, and when they come in, they change the society, right? And then that leadership goes away because people die, right? And capitalists come in and they cause problems, obfuscate, make things difficult. But what those leaders did and how they changed the society persists typically. So like the Soviet Union is a really clear example, and it's a good example to use because it's the one that's most explicitly no longer interested in a communist sort of ideological backing. Even though, anyway, it doesn't matter. I won't go down that rabbit hole. It's fine. But like when the communists came in to power, Russia was a feudal agrarian society, right? It was ruled by kings, czars, but like kings. It's a monarchy. Everybody was illiterate. Everybody was poor. There's no such thing as like tech jobs and stuff like that. Like it's straight up just serfs working the land with like hand plow and oxen. And in the course of a single generation, they went from that to being the first people into space. Like that's a significant achievement. The subway systems get built under the communists. The communists defeat the Nazis. The communists increase the literacy rate in their country. The communists increase everybody's prosperity wildly. They build massive infrastructure projects to deal with homelessness. They do all kinds of things that were very clearly beneficial for the Soviet Union. And then so that somebody like you, who doesn't actually know anything about the subject, just gets to discard all of those pretty major achievements with this claim there was starvation. Yeah, like natural disasters happen, my man. Like that happens in the West too. Right? The difference is that when natural disasters happen in communist countries, people go stand in line for food. Whereas in capitalist countries, they just die. Right? Like that's the difference. So like this sort of odd claim that you're making, that again is not really rooted in anything that's serious. If USSR was a paradise, nobody made that claim. Like I don't understand this mania of capitalist apologists that insist that if it's not 100% perfect, if it's literally not Jesus Christ on a throne in heaven, then it's a failure. And you do that because it's a fallacy, right? It's this perfection fallacy. If it's not perfect, then we can dismiss it. And of course, you achieve that by ignoring all of the major problems that exist within your own society. So already it's just disingenuous what you've said, which makes it very difficult for me to want to continue this conversation. Like, nobody's claiming the USSR was a paradise. We're saying the USSR was better than feudalism, but with like clear indicators and clear markers. And the Finnish people had their own history, right? The Finnish people were facing revolution of their own, and were also caught up in the rise of Nazism, right? So the reason why the Finnish people don't flood into Russia is because they're dealing with their own country. It's this like absolute, like, just stupid idea. If you like communism so much, why don't you move there? Like, can you think of reasons why that might not be the case? Like, can you think of reasons why that might not be the case? Because I feel like anybody with a brain in their head could think of that. And like, the Finnish people are dealing with their own shit and dealing with a revolution of their own, which ultimately resolves or devolves, if you like, or settles into what we would understand as social democracy. That the capitalists give concessions ultimately to the people who are revolting. And it's in the face of a communist revolution that the Finnish people end up in this social democracy, which they have to constantly fight to uphold, right? Which is the major critique that communists have of social democracies, that ultimately capitalists will dismantle them because you're allowing the parasite to live, like you're allowing the cancer to live. But so this sort of weird idea that you're holding on to, that because the Finnish people weren't swarming into Russia, like, the Finns were dealing with their own shit, and they don't have this very selfish, self-centered worldview that you seem to have, where, oh, I'm going to abandon my family, abandon my friends, abandon my community, steal as much as I possibly can, and rush away. Like, no, they were in Finland, dealing with Finland, because there were Finns, and that's where everything they knew was. And they were fighting for a better life, and it can be argued that they got it. Like, certainly a social democracy is better than feudalism, right? So it's just this like extreme. Like, I just find it so odd. That's what people do when they believe the other side is great. Like, oh my God, dude. Gavin. Like, there is no significant revolutionary movement that exists in Mexico, first of all. Also, like, when are you going to get that the reason people are fleeing up into America is because America is doing acts of enormous violence against people in the global South? Like, we literally go down there and fuck them up. Like straight up. Like, we're constantly trying to coup Venezuela and make things So, Gavin, I think what you're encountering here is your lack of understanding of the subject again, right? That history exists and events exist. Like, what was going on the lead up to World War II and the denouement from World War II is different than what is happening on the current United States-Mexico border. These are different historical events with different historical conditions. That your childish sort of presentation that, like, USSR good, Finnish don't go, therefore communism bad, right? Mexicans go to America. America, great. It's just childish. Like, it really is. It's just a childish way to look at the world. And that history exists, right? Like, there are events that happen. So in Finland, you have like the rise of the Communist Party within Finland, the threat of revolution from within Finland, World War II, Finland's unfortunate history with the Nazis, right? The suppression of the communists. You have a whole struggle. There is a refugee crisis that occurs. People do flee to the USSR in order to get away from World War II. But where's the front line in World War II? Oh, it's on the Soviet border. Like, seems like a major historical moment to not know anything about. You're not describing anything, Roy. You don't know anything about the subject. Like, this is going to be embarrassing. So go ahead, embarrass yourself in my chat. I'm looking forward to this. This is going to be really funny. Watching this guy embarrass himself like this. Yeah, context is communism, exactly. Low observable goat. Yeah, if you want to know something about the subject, that's communism. Yeah, long defiant. You're going to describe the Soviet Union according to the CIA. Yeah. They took everything away from my family. We had a plantation full of slaves, and so that's why Stalin is bad. We owned acres and acres of farmland and kept people in wage slavery in order to work that land while we did nothing important. And so the Soviets were bad because they got rid of my family, who were slavers. Wow, Kevin's taking a long time writing this out. This is going to be good. Like, I'm really actually getting hyped for this. Oh, here we go. A majorly agrarian society. That's how it began. That's correct. With some heavy industry. That's where they went. That's right. You can see the remainings of massive staple houses in countryside Russia, major food rations, government services in said conditions. Cool. Like, normal. Am I supposed to be aghast by this? Goodness me! The Soviet Union provided services and provided food rations during a major world crisis. You know that America also did food rationing, right? Oh, now we're getting to it. You're a pawn in there because Roy wants to be a king, and Roy thinks that he's a king. He's just a temporary embarrassed billionaire. Not for an owner, but for a state. Yeah, like, that's the theory of communism, right? That communists feel that they have to wield the power of the state, and that things need to be taken control of by the state in initially a state capitalist model, in order to transition successfully away from feudalism and monarchy and anarchy towards a more full version of communism, right? Like, what you're doing is essentially engaging in sort of the dim-witted fallacy that communism is a flip that you switch, or a switch that you flip. You're just like, oh, they're poor peasants. Communism switch flipped. Everyone to the moon, right? Like, it's just not how it works, right? Like, if you want to get into the nuts and bolts of it, like, communists feel that state control is necessary to protect the population from external forces, right? So, like, when Lenin, for example, Lenin was initially invaded by the Germans, right? Before World War II. The Germans were invading when Lenin was around. And Lenin essentially arranged a surrender and a ceasefire, basically. So, highly controversial. But I think he understood that he couldn't win that war. And so it was better to negotiate a general surrender. But without the state there and without that state control being able to respond to it, the Germans would just roll in, right? So Gavin writes, in practice, it's not beautifully as the state represent the people and will do everything according to the people's will. In reality, you're just highly controlled and become a pawn subjected to the mold. Like, what's cartoonish about your presentation, Roy, is that we look at America. Like, we see what capitalism is, right? Like, yeah, just upon, bro, you just described capitalism. Yeah, this is a real, like, socialism is when capitalism moment. But Roy, you've proven over and over again that you don't actually know anything about communism, right? Like, this is why when you get into these sorts of statements, it's very difficult to take you seriously, because it's pretty clear that you're not engaging with an inquisitive mind. You're not actually trying to be curious. You're just trying to convince people of something when you don't know anything about the subject. Like, that's really what I'm trying to drive into you, right? Like, you're not convincing. Like, this isn't working in your favor. You don't look good here. And the reason why you don't actually look good, and the reason why you seem kind of clownish and cartoonish, is because you're ignorant. Like, you don't actually know anything about the subject. And it's just something I encounter over and over and over again with people like you. That you're not actually engaging to learn anything or to know anything or to hear really what's being said to you or to engage meaningfully. You're just trying to spread around your stupid take that is literally ignorance. Like, it's just stupid. It's not based in anything. Like, you don't have any books to source. You don't have any essays to source. You don't have any lectures to source. Like, you don't have anything interesting to say, because everything you're saying is stupid and ignorant, and you sound stupid and ignorant, right? And I just feel like you need to hear this, if you're capable of hearing this. That, yeah, like this kind of thing. It's because you don't see yourself into a cult. Like, it's just stupid. So I think that you're too stupid to talk to. So I think that's rule 3, right? Don't be too stupid to talk to. So I think you're good. Like, ask questions, right? Maybe learn something about the subject. Maybe read a book. Have something interesting to bring to the table before you start talking. Like, keep your mouth shut. Because you are very illiterate and not intelligent. Like, you don't actually know anything about the subject. And I know that sounds very insulting and dismissive, but somebody's got to tell you. You don't know what you're talking about. Long Defiant writes, the capitalism cult? You keep describing capitalism. I don't think communism means what you think it means. Yeah, no, he doesn't know anything about communism. Like, that's the thing. Right? It's just yet another clueless boob who thinks he knows something about the subject, but he has nothing interesting to say. Right? Like, he doesn't know who Engels is. He's never read the Communist Manifesto or Marx. He's certainly never read anything written by Lenin or Stalin. He's never read Mao. Like, he doesn't know anything. He doesn't even know the history of the area. Like, usually guys like this get to the Holodomor at least. Right? But he probably doesn't even know what that is. Right? Like, it's just stupid. And just too stupid to continue with. So Kewell writes, capitalism is worldwide and it doesn't work. Well, it works for Elon Musk. Let's give it a chance to worldwide communism. Yeah. XD says, this might be the same person coming in with alt accounts. Their mannerism seems the same. Well, I didn't ban this Gavin Roy guy the first time, right? just, it is just astounding, man. The assuredness, the certainty. And then the moment you challenge these guys, like, they just don't have anything. Like, who am I supposed to read then? Like, what texts should I be reading? What should I be looking at? Because when I use my eyes to look at reality, right? Yeah, he loves his chains so much. Yeah. Honestly, the truth is he's probably just like a kid, right? He's probably a kid that lives with his parents, right? He doesn't really have a job. That's probably what's going on. Because, I mean, the moment you get out into the workforce and you actually start working for these capitalists, it becomes pretty apparent pretty fast that this is a pretty illegitimate system. Like, the amount of times these guys will bring up, like, in the Soviet Union, you had to wait in line for bread. It's like, yeah, you wait in line for bread now, right? And if there was a famine or some kind of natural disaster going on, there would be no bread. You would be abandoned. Just like the people in New Orleans were abandoned, right? During the hurricane. Like, it's just weird. Like, it's weird how often these guys will point at something that happened in the Soviet Union or any communist country and be like, here is a bad thing that happened, and then you can find its parallel happening in capitalism, and literally they just abandoned everybody. So just the amount of effort these guys work into disproving their own theses is just incredible. Just this self-defeating self-destruction. I just don't even know. Like, there's a reason why the West is in decline, and it is because our educators have become illiterate themselves, that they're not actually interested in educating anybody, that it is this, like, indoctrination system to make sure that you understand that you're supposed to enrich billionaires, and that's the structure of the system, and we're not getting away from it. Well, I think I'm going to close this one down. This is a good stream, guys. I'm always glad. And one thing I want to really, yeah, if it wasn't for food banks, millions would go hungry. Exactly. Yeah, we're in like a food bank crisis right now. It's crazy. I really want to let you guys know that I really appreciate y'all being here, you know? You are the ones that make this really worthwhile. You are the ones that make this really good to do. I always leave these feeling more uplifted and feeling blessed and honored. I'm so honored that you spend this time with me, that I just hit the stream button and you guys listen in and share your thoughts. It's a real blessing, honestly. So thank you so much for being here. Always remember, each and every one of you is a quantum being walking around in quantum energy. These billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars to make sure you'll never realize it. You'll just stay the good little commodity they need you to be. Rebel. Revolt. Repent. Good luck. We're going to need it.